Every so often, a TV show comes along that completely dominates the cultural conversation. In past eras, it's been things like The Sopranos, The Simpsons, or Breaking Bad. Something mature that redefines the way the public views television as a medium. But in the 2010s, the internet was rocked by a very different kind of program. My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic.
Oh yeah, it turns out I want Pinkie Pie and Rainbow Dash.
No, it's called clapping, Dad.
Oh, Fluttershy. Gentlemen, onward.
While half the web was infatuated with this show, the other half was simply left scratching their heads, wondering why so many grown adult men who called themselves Bronies had become obsessed with a cartoon designed to sell toys to little girls. As outsiders to the trends, me and my team decided to sit down and actually watch through the show in order to figure out why exactly it caught on the way it did, and also why you don't hear much about it a decade later. This is the story of MLP FIM, the birthplace of the Brony fandom, and how it all devolved into a cesspool of drama and degeneracy. But while I was watching the series, I needed something tasty to eat, which brings us to today's sponsor, Factor. Factor makes meeting your nutrition goals easier than ever by delivering fresh, never frozen, dietitian-approved meals right to your doorstep. Their team of gourmet chefs creates each meal using only ingredients with integrity to help you feel your best, all day long. As someone who doesn't like spending a ton of time trying to figure out what to eat for lunch every day, it's really convenient just to have these meals delivered to my house. On top of being a lot more convenient than having to drive somewhere for food, you also get healthier options than most fast food restaurants. You can choose from a weekly menu of 35 meals that include genres such as Calorie Smart, Keto, Protein Plus, and Vegan and Veggie. On top of this, you can also pick from 60 add-ons every week like breakfast, on-the-go items, snacks, and beverages. My favorite meal this week was hamburger served on cauliflower cheese grits with a side of zucchini. I know it sounds strange, but it was actually extremely delicious, and this is a service that allows me to try new types of meal combinations. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code GFMFB50 to get 50% off plus free breakfast for 1 year. That's code GFMFB50 at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free breakfast for 1 year. My Little Pony was a brand that existed since 1982, started by the toy company Hasbro following the success of their product My Pretty Pony. Like most toy lines from the 80s, MLP was given an animated series in order to cross-promote the products to children. For most of its existence, the brand was viewed as nothing more than a bit of cheap fluff without any real artistic merit. That's why it came as such a shock when in the late 2000s it was announced that animation veteran Lauren Faust, best known for her work on beloved shows like Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends and the Powerpuff Girls, had been hired to create a new pony cartoon. Faust had initially approached Hasbro to pitch an original concept called Milky Way and the Galaxy Girls, but they asked her instead to headline a new My Little Pony show following the then recent success of Michael Bay's Transformers. They also wanted the show to air on their new network, The Hub, not that one, a rebranding of the Discovery Kids that they were co-owners of. Lauren admitted that she was initially hesitant to take the job. Even though she had been an MLP fan since childhood, she was concerned that the widespread cultural image of the original cartoon would be impossible to escape from. As she wrote in an article around the beginning of her iteration's airing, "Shows based on girls' toys always left a bad taste in my mouth, even when I was a child. They did not reflect the way I played with my toys. I assigned my ponies and my strawberry shortcake dolls distinctive personalities and sent them on epic adventures to save the world. On TV, though, I couldn't tell one girl character from another, and they just had endless tea parties, giggled over nothing, and defeated villains by either sharing with them or crying, which miraculously inspired the villain to turn nice. Even to my 7-year-old self, these shows made no sense and couldn't keep my interest." Despite her reservations, her desire to create a female-led animated series and Hasbro's assurance that they shared similar goals convinced Faust that this was the right job for her. Development for the show came together quickly as Lauren was given the freedom to hire a team of artists and writers largely composed of people she had worked with on previous projects. In fact, considering how protective these big companies tend to be of their IP, she was given a surprising amount of creative leeway in most stages of production. The personalities for the ponies were not dictated by the brand, and were instead decided by how Lauren remembered characterizing them when she played with the toys as a child. It seems that Hasbro's billion-dollar win of handing over the reins of Transformers to Michael Bay gave them the confidence here to do the same for MLP. Find an accomplished creative mind and allow her to do what she felt best to reinvigorate a stagnant IP. There were certain places where Lauren's team received pushback though. Her goal was to take My Little Pony in a more action and adventure-oriented direction, but the censors worried that anything too intense might scare off the intended audience of young children. Here's what she had to say during a later interview with the fan site Equestria Daily. "We had to figure out how to make the more adventure-y shows compelling and exciting without being scary. It took some extra thought and a combination of careful storytelling, lots of jokes, and appropriate appealing designs." Similarly, there was also worry about seeming mean, and I don't mean cruel or dastardly, I mean slightly rude or mildly insulting. We had educational and informational standards to adhere to, and character behavior that was considered okay in shows I'd worked on previously was suddenly considered inappropriate for children in My Little Pony. It was tough to find humor and create character conflict without these very constricting boundaries. After a fast-paced pre-production, My Little Pony's fourth generation, Friendship is Magic, premiered on October 10th, 2010. That just leaves one question. Was it any good? Well, going forward, I'll be going in depth on my watch-through of the entire 221 episode series. But for the sake of everyone's sanity, I'll only be highlighting the most notable episodes in regards to lore progression, or those that left a lasting impact on the series fanbase, whether for good or bad reasons. So with that out of the way, let's begin with the pilot.
It needs to be about 20% cooler.
The debut episode, aptly titled Friendship is Magic Part 1, begins with a brief lore dump about the history of Equestria, the show's setting. 1,000 years ago, princess sisters Celestia and Luna both ruled together, with the former representing the day and the latter representing the night. But Luna grew jealous that the ponies seemed to love her siblings more than her. This jealousy eventually consumed her, transforming Luna into the evil entity Nightmare Moon. Left with no other option, Celestia was forced to trap her sister within the moon using 6 magical relics called the Elements of Harmony. We next flash forward to modern day where we meet our protagonist, Twilight Sparkle, a studious young unicorn living in Equestria's capital city of Canterlot. When she begins to notice troubling signs that Nightmare Moon could be returning, she brings this information to her mentor, Princess Celestia. But the monarch has other concerns, instead sending Twilight to the town of Ponyville to help prepare for the annual Summer Sun celebration. She also gives her pupil the secondary instruction to make some friends, something Twilight scoffs off as frivolous and unimportant. When Twilight and her dragon companion Spike arrive in Ponyville, they meet the characters who will become our principal cast: the fun-loving Pinkie Pie, the hard-working Applejack, the adventurous Rainbow Dash, the glamorous Rarity, and the timid Fluttershy. While Twilight initially does not get along with this gang, she's forced into proximity with them since they're all working on setting up the festivities. The episode concludes with the Summer Sun Festival being halted by the return of Nightmare Moon, who threatens to send Equestria into eternal night, leaving us on a cliffhanger ending. In the second part of the premiere, Twilight and her new friends are forced to travel to the Everfree Forest in order to find the Elements of Harmony and defeat Nightmare Moon. During the dangerous journey, each member of the group is given the opportunity to demonstrate that they each represent a different element. Applejack is honesty, Rainbow Dash is loyalty, Fluttershy is kindness, Rarity is generosity, and Pinkie Pie is laughter. The sixth and final element is kept a mystery until the end. The ponies eventually reach the tower where they find the magical items, only to be confronted by Nightmare Moon. Twilight abandons her new group in order to confront the villain alone, and the relics are destroyed as a result. When the group comes to her aid though, Twilight realizes that the elements are still alive and well within them. She becomes the sixth element, Magic, and together they defeat Nightmare Moon. They also receive fancy new jewelry in the process, which I'm sure sold a lot of toys. The story ends with the evil entity turning back into Luna. She and Celestia forgive one another, and the sisters agree to once again rule Equestria together. As for Twilight, she and Spike decide to remain in Ponyville with their new friends rather than return to Canterlot, establishing the status quo moving forward.
Are you excited? Because I'm excited. I've never been so excited. Well, except for the time that went, but I mean, really.
The public response to My Little Pony Friendship is Magic's two-part pilot was swift, although not entirely positive. Kathleen Richter, a writer for Miss Magazine, criticized the show with some strange reasoning in an article titled, "My Little Homophobic, Racist, Smart-Shaming Pony." I showed the video to fellow Miss Intern/blogger Kyle and asked, "What's wrong with this picture?" He responded, "There aren't any black ponies. Why aren't there any brothers on the wall? I had originally assumed that the purple ponies were supposed to represent black ponies. But he was right. The ponies don't seem very racially diverse. Ponyville also seems to be a culture that dismisses girls who prefer reading books to playing dress-up and looking beautiful. And sparkling, of course." There were also people from the online animation community who weren't happy about it either. Shortly after the airing, an article was posted to the website Cartoon Brew decrying both My Little Pony and the Hub Network as a whole as the end of creator-driven TV animation. It argued that someone as prolific as Lauren Faust working on a show based on a toy line, airing on a network owned by Hasbro themselves, meant that the artistic integrity was effectively dead. This article quickly spread across the internet, but probably not for the reasons intended by its writer. Most of the people who read it firmly disagreed with his take on the subject. They argued that Friendship is Magic actually proved that creative freedom was thriving, since this reboot took on such a widely different art style and tone than any other My Little Pony cartoon that had come before it, and that Lauren's unique talents were clearly visible on screen. Prior to this, online animation fans had taken notice of Friendship is Magic's early marketing, and appreciated it for what it was. But this article ignited a new kind of passion, the likes of which had never been seen before. Users of 4chan's Comics and Cartoons board quickly flocked to the show's defense, deriding the Cartoon Brew think piece as being reactionary and alarmist. Perhaps out of some combination of irony and genuine love of the show, they began posting about My Little Pony incessantly on the message board. This led to a schism between pony fans and all other 4chaners who had absolutely no interest in watching a show aimed at little girls. Eventually, the mere mention of ponies was enough to get you banned from the site. 4chan has always been viewed as a fairly niche and impenetrable community, and due to its ephemeral nature, some early MLP fandom content has been lost to time. However, the exodus of pony fans from the site made it so word of Friendship is Magic could spread further across the internet. They began creating their own online spaces such as PonyChan and the MLP subreddit. Equestria Daily launched in early 2011 and quickly became a cornerstone of the fandom. The blog shared MLP-related news as well as user-submitted creations. As Season 1 continued, the online fanbase grew at an exponential pace. It's unclear when exactly the term was coined, but soon enough adults who enjoyed watching My Little Pony began referring to themselves as Bronies. In MLP's 6th episode, titled Boastbusters, a unicorn named Trixie arrives in Ponyville claiming to be the greatest magic user in all of Equestria, but she is revealed as a fraud when a threat arrives that she is powerless to stop. This is one of the earliest examples of fandom discourse influencing things behind the scenes. You see, in early drafts of Boastbusters, Trixie was intended to be a male character before being made female at some point during development. That being said, a remnant of the previous idea was left in unintentionally. While ladies have 2 white dots within their pupils, gentlemen have only 1. And despite being a female pony, Trixie's eyes only had 1 white dot in Boastbusters. This led Bronies to speculate about whether or not she was intended to be transgender. To be clear, Trixie was never stated to be trans in any episode of My Little Pony. In fact, the eye dot mistake would be corrected in her future appearances. Regardless, this was still treated as canon by many Bronies for years. The fan theory was further validated in 2016, when Lauren tweeted, "For reals, one Season 1 character is trans." Season 1, Episode 15, Feeling Pinkie Keen, follows Twilight as she attempts to find a logical explanation for Pinkie Pie's ability to predict future events, which she calls her Pinkie Sense. But this search for answers only produces more questions, resulting in Twilight being repeatedly injured in an over-the-top cartoonish fashion. This is the first really controversial episode of Friendship is Magic amongst Bronies for a couple of reasons. Firstly, some audience members objected to the constant slapstick comedy that Twilight was subjected to, viewing it as needlessly cruel. The far more controversial aspect of this episode, though, was its ending, in which Twilight concludes that, even though she doesn't understand the Pinky sense, she still chooses to believe in its existence. This infuriated certain section of the fanbase, who claimed that the show was promoting an anti-science message to children.
First thing is first, you cannot choose to believe in anything. Your beliefs are decided by your experiences and your perceptions. If you think something is bogus, you're either not going to believe it or you're going to willfully delude yourself, which is not a healthy lifestyle choice.
The debate actually grew to such an extent that Lauren Faust chimed in on her DeviantArt page in order to clarify the morals she had been trying to convey. There are simply phenomenons that are difficult to explain, and I'm of the opinion that faith can apply to more things than just religion. In the end, if there is an idea we explore that leads us to inconclusive answers, we are left with a choice: believe it anyway, reject it, or wait for more answers. Obviously rather deep for our audience, I know. And obviously up to lots and lots of interpretation. Maybe it was a mistake. By the way, I'm not sure if I'm going to regret putting in my 2 cents on this one, so if my replying to this starts flame wars or invites trolls, I'm going to delete it. I really like having discussions with viewers, but I've been getting more nervous about it of late. In episode 23, the Cutie Mark Crusaders are a group of young ponies consisting of Applejack's sister Applebloom, Rarity's sister Sweetie Belle, and Scootaloo, a Pegasus who idolizes Rainbow Dash. As the name of their group implies, they are on a constant mission to earn their cutie marks, a unique symbol that magically appears on a pony when they discover their special talent. This episode is titled The Cutie Mark Chronicles because the Crusaders ask each of the main 6 ponies how they earn their marks in order to better figure out how they can get it on their own. This is Season 1's highest rated episode on IMDb, sitting at 8.9 out of 10 stars. It's one of the first examples of the show attempting to dive into the lore and history of its characters, revealing that each of the main ponies receive their cutie marks at the exact same moment, as a direct result of Rainbow Dash performing a sonic rainboom, a sonic boom that is rainbow colored obviously. It's also just an extremely well-paced episode of television. One of the biggest issues with MLP's earlier seasons is that the writers seem to occasionally struggle with writing for the large cast, trying to give every character something to do in every episode, which often resulted in the plot stalling for minutes on end. In the Cutie Mark Chronicles, though, each of the main 6 ponies contributes to moving things forward, as they all tell their stories at a swift and natural pace. Episode 25, Party of One, begins with Pinkie Pie throwing a lively birthday party for her pet alligator, Gummy. The main 6 arrive to enjoy the festivities, and Twilight remarks they should party more often. Things go wrong when Pinkie Pie tries to host an after-birthday party the next day, and all of her friends claim to be busy with suspicious excuses. Growing doubtful, Pinkie wears a disguise to spy on them, only to overhear her friends discussing how to avoid her. Distraught, she falls into a depressive spiral, straightening her hair and throwing herself a party with inanimate objects. Of course, this story has a happy ending, as it turns out she completely forgot it was her own birthday, and they wanted the party to be a surprise. Realizing her mistake, Pinkie returns to her cheerful self, and learns that true friends sometimes keep secrets for good reasons. While this episode is fairly by the books as far as cartoons go, it actually caused quite a stir amongst the fandom. Pinkie Pie's mental breakdown unintentionally mirrored a creepypasta that had gone viral a few weeks prior. Thought to have first appeared on 4chan in January 2011, Cupcakes reimagines Pinkie Pie as a cannibalistic psychopath who kills other ponies for her titular pastries. This slowly transformed into a separate bloodthirsty personality named Pinkamena, Pinkie Pie's canonical full name. While certainly written before Cupcakes was a thing, this episode led Pinkamena to be depicted with straight hair, helping form the ethos of her insane, bloodthirsty counterpart. Another early controversial web reimagining centered around Princess Celestia. It started when fans noticed a few instances in which she intentionally frustrated the main characters, leading some to dub her Trollestia. Because her personality was a blank slate, a lot of Brony in-jokes played off of this. For example, Celestia had been the sole ruler of Equestria for 1,000 years. Some questioned how she had been able to stay in control for so long, characterizing her as a power-hungry tyrant. But the most notorious took it even further, coining the name Princess Molestia. As you may have guessed, this variant started on 4chan, usually as an offhand one-note joke. This changed upon the creation of a Tumblr blog in the fall of 2011 regarding the meme. It must be understood that on Tumblr, a popular form of role-playing are ask blogs. An author, or sometimes multiple authors, will answer questions in character, with the most popular usually accompanying their post with artwork. That takes us to Ask Princess Molestia, which despite the troll premise clearly had a lot of time put into its posts. It was created by an artist named JJ, who raised the popularity of this character. At the blog's height, it amassed 70,000 followers. Given this was on Tumblr and most of the jokes centered around assault, the backlash was expected and immediate. A blog named Down with Molestia was made to protest its popularity, organizing mass flagging campaigns. They argued it was simply the latest example of a disturbing culture being promoted in the My Little Pony fanbase. Ask Molestia survived a few more years, getting shut down for good in 2014. The exact reason for its closure is still unclear. Nicole Oliver, the voice actress of Celestia, had unwittingly tweeted out an image from the blog, then quickly deleted the post when she learned of its source. This fueled speculation Hasbro became aware of the account and issued a cease and desist. However, there is a post from the blog's final days that implies JJ had been planning to leave anyway. Ask Princess Molestia deactivated shortly after, with its final influence being to popularize the fan interpretation of her sister, Princess Luna, as a gamer. But you know what, I'm getting ahead of myself here, as we haven't even finished talking about the first season. Season 1 of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic concludes with the best night ever, as the ponies travel to Canterlot to attend the Grand Galloping Gala, the most prestigious event in all of Equestria. While they all have sky-high expectations for the party, one by one they wind up disappointed. The shindig ends in disaster, and the ponies realize that they never needed a fancy gala to be happy, only their friendship, which was indeed magic. All in all, this was a fairly entertaining story with a standard moral in a season filled with fairly entertaining stories with standard morals. That's not criticism, it's a show made for small children after all, so that's pretty much what I and most other audiences would have expected from it. Yet something about Friendship is Magic, from its musical numbers to its simple, colorful style and internet-savvy humor, resonated with its growing adult fanbase. There was an unprecedented amount of fan art, fanfiction, and other works flooding the internet. YouTube saw a wave of pony music videos, also known as PMVs, which synced up clips of the show to music or audio from other television shows and movies.
Don't think that me letting you in here is an invitation for any funny stuff. I mean, not that I have a problem with funny stuff.
That was alongside an influx of memes, remixes, and parodies. These only grew larger in scope and quality as time went on. Honoring the show's themes, the community was quite welcoming and open to collaboration. There was a wide variety of amateur talent from animators to voice actors. Together, these indie artists were able to accomplish far more than they could have been able to alone. An early example of this is Ponies the Anthology, a collection of high-quality edits sourced from the community that garnered millions of views. Similarly, a common trend were videos listing the top 10 pony videos of each month. These efforts brought the fandom together and helped keep Bronies on the same page. By the time Season 1 finished airing, the Brony community had firmly established itself online. Even if you weren't watching the show, you were aware of it. The hype had grown to such a degree that it had even begun spreading offline. It all began with a small Manhattan gathering on May 28, 2011, organized by Jessica Blank, who went by the name of Purple Tinker. While the attendance of this event was just a little over 24, that would more than double the following month, when nearly 100 ponies assembled in New York. The gathering was dubbed BronyCon, and was a humble beginning for something that would grow far bigger, eventually becoming a massive staple of the fandom in the years that followed. In fact, it was only a few months later in September that the next BronyCon was held, with series director Jason Thiessen appearing as the guest of honor. A few months after that, the third convention featuring voice actresses Adria Libman, who played Pinkie Pie and Fluttershy, Ashley Ball, who played Rainbow Dash and Applejack, and Nicole Oliver, who played Celestia. Yes, the cast and crew of MLP was more than happy to embrace this unexpected audience. It was also in May of 2011 that a new commercial for the show began airing on the Hub, featuring Pinkie Pie singing a parody of the song California Girls by Katy Perry, that included a direct mention of Bronies.
Bronies, hey there. Hang up too. Come on, Bronies. 'Cause they know we're awesome Phillies. Come on, every pony.
It's also interesting to note that this video was titled Equestria Girls, a name that would later be used for a much less warmly received pony project, but more on that later. A few days after the commercial began airing, Hasbro released an extended version of the music video. Rather than publish the video directly, it premiered on Equestria Daily in recognition of the site's dedication to the community. The video was also notable for explicitly recognizing the name fans had given to a previously unnamed background pony. To rewind back a little bit, in the 14th episode of Season 1, a blue-haired unicorn can be seen DJing at Rarity's fashion show. Despite being on screen for less than 5 seconds, her unique design left a strong impression on fans. A number of different nicknames emerged, culminating in a poll on Equestria Daily. The results were a tie between DJ Pone 3 and Scratch, with DJ Pone 3 ahead by a few votes. Ultimately, they settled on the former being an alias, with her real name being Vinyl Scratch. DJ Pone 3 was far from the only background character to get a nickname from fans. The fandom became prolific in raising the profile of nameless side characters, assigning them monikers, personalities, and backstories. The staff recognized this and increasingly honored their headcanon, essentially allowing Bronies to determine their official personalities democratically. It was completely unheard of for a show to embrace its audience in such a personal way. But not all of the post-Season 1 updates were positively received. On May 8, 2011, shortly after the airing of The Best Night Ever, Lauren Faust announced that she would be stepping down as the showrunner for Friendship is Magic. Various circumstances with the production made it increasingly impossible for me to keep up the level of personal creative involvement and control that I had at the start of the series. I don't think I can accurately express how difficult and painful the decision was and still is. She stated she would still act as a consulting producer for Season 2, although that mainly extended to the next few stories. Picking up the baton for her would be writer Megan McCarthy, who wrote a piece for Equestria Daily assuring fans that Lauren's creative spirit would not be discarded. But anyway, with that, the second season of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic began airing on September 17, 2011 under new leadership, as online popularity continued to grow.
Good luck, every pony!
Before we go any further, I have a confession to make. I had already watched Season 1 of Friendship is Magic shortly after it came out in 2010. I heard of people ironically watching the show when it was released, and as I was browsing Netflix streaming on my Nintendo Wii one night, I stumbled upon the show and figured I'd watch an episode to learn the names of the ponies to get in on the trolling. But I was surprised by how entertaining it was, and ended up binge-watching the entire first season. I vividly remember my father walking into the room with a look of disgust on his face seeing what I was watching, with that response still etched into my brain over a decade later. While I thought it was a funny troll at the time, the more I saw unironically unhinged degenerate bronies on my internet feed, I decided to tap out after the first season. There is a reason I bring up this anecdote though. An undiscussed part of MLP's rise to popularity was its availability on the now streaming giant. If the show had premiered only a few years earlier, it would have released on an obscure cable channel and go to DVD for a niche audience. But because of it being introduced in the early days of streaming, it became one of the first programs to benefit from what would eventually be coined the Netflix bump, going into the second series. And because of this, momentum would only grow from there. MLP's sophomore season begins with the return of Harmony Part 1. Here, a powerful spirit named Discord, who had been imprisoned by Celestia and Luna centuries prior, breaks free and begins causing havoc all over Equestria. Before the main six can even make a move or try to stop him, Discord steals the elements of harmony and challenges the ponies to win his game in order to get them back. The rules are simple. They must find their way to the center of a maze he created without flying or using their magic. As the ponies traverse this labyrinth, Discord manipulates them one by one, corrupting their minds and turning the friends against each other. Eventually, he tricks Rainbow Dash into flying away, causing our heroes to lose the game, resulting in a cliffhanger ending. The return of harmony marks a notable tonal shift for Friendship is Magic. While I hesitate to call it dark, it certainly feels like it has a bit more of an edge to it than anything found in Season 1. A large part of that comes from the story's villain. While most of what Discord does can at worst be described as mischief, seeing the glee in which he tears down the strong friendships of the main six does serve to give him a more sinister energy. With elements like this, maybe my father can begin to understand why adults like this show too. Discord is voiced by actor John D. Lancey, who is best known for playing a very similar character named Q on Star Trek The Next Generation. According to Jason Thiessen, it was Lauren's idea to cast him in the role, as she was still playing a significant part in the show's production at the early point in the season. Delancey would also go on to become a significant figure in the Brony fanbase, but that wouldn't be for some time yet. The second part of this story arc begins with Twilight recovering the elements of harmony after realizing they had never been hidden in the maze at all. She then reminds her friends of who they once were, freeing them from Discord's corruption and allowing them to seal him away in a statue once again. It also holds the distinction of being premiered live at the second ever BronyCon by Jason Thiessen himself, the first episode to achieve that honor. Hype for Season 2 had already hit a fever pitch, and the MLP crew was eager to continue engaging with this unexpected fanbase. All the way back in the very beginning of Season 1, viewers noticed a background pony who, due to an animation error, appeared to have her eyes crossed. They instantly fell in love with the character based solely on that one detail, giving her the name Derpy Hooves. She soon became a staple of the Brony meme culture, practically taking on the role of mascot for the community. Of course, this soon caught the attention of MLP's creative team, who began inserting Derpy into small cameo appearances whenever they could. This brings us to Season 2, Episode 14, The Last Roundup, when Derpy's name was finally made canon as she had her first speaking role.
Now, careful, Derpy! I just don't know what went wrong!
While this was a delight to Bronies, it was not so amusing to the other audience of people who you may have forgotten were also watching Friendship is Magic: parents and young children. They accused Derpy of being offensive to those with learning disabilities, and demanded that Hasbro take action to make things right. The episode's writer, Amy Keating Rogers, wrote about the backlash in an email that was later posted to Equestria Daily. I got about 10 emails saying how offended folks were. People labeled me an ableist, a word I've never heard of, and said that I was being insensitive to the disabled by calling this character Derpy. I then did a search on what Derpy meant, and the first thing that came up were embarrassing and awkward, which is what I thought. But then when I did more in-depth searches, I discovered that one definition is retarded. I was not the only one getting contacted regarding Derpy's portrayal. Positive and negative feedback was also being sent to Hasbro and the Hub. After some internal discussions, the episode was taken down and replaced with a new cut in which Derpy's name is never spoken. Her voice is significantly altered, and her eyes are changed to be less crossed. In addition, the character has never again been referred to as Derpy by official media. It seems as though they never settled on a new canon name for her, as she has been called things like Bubbly Mare, Party Filly, or Ditsy Doo, which was her original name in the script for The Last Roundup. There is still debate in online circles as to whether the change was necessary, and most bronies still refer to her as Derpy. This was the repercussion to the show being so sensitive to feedback. You can't please everyone. Still, most would agree this was a worthwhile trade-off. Voice actors, writers, and the showrunners frequently fielded questions from the public. Lauren herself even had an AMA on PonyChan, a level of community engagement that was unprecedented among cartoons at the time. When Wired did a piece on the Brony phenomena, the official MLP Facebook celebrated their biggest fans. It went further than just embracing the internet's unlikely fixation. Lauren viewed their lack of shame in enjoying a show intended for little girls as a strong defiance of gender norms. When Brony haters asked for her thoughts on the fandom, expecting her to be repulsed, she instead wrote lengthy replies in their defense. "I didn't create this show for little girls. I created it for little girls and their parents, including male parents. It only stands to reason that adult animation fans without children may like it too. The belief that boys shouldn't be interested in girls' things is the main reason there's hardly anything decent for girls in animation, or almost any media for that matter. It's a backwards, sexist, outdated attitude." It was also during this period as some of the most influential Brony musicians emerged. What must be understood is how pivotal the show's music was to its success. Daniel Ingram, Friendship is Magic's composer, was responsible for making the sequences more Broadway and cinematic. Songs like Winter Wrap-Up would inspire remixes from artists like The Living Tombstone, who is most well known nowadays for his songs about Five Nights at Freddy's. But people forget that he actually got his start in the Brony community. Vocals for many of the most popular remixes were provided by artists like Alex S., Mike the Microphone, and of course, Eurobeat Brony, who made a song dedicated to the fan-favorite villain Discord. The Living Tombstone's remix of this track now sits at over 83 million views. According to the Rolling Stone magazine, who interviewed Ingram, numerous tracks by Brony musicians were rivaling those of label-signed musicians. It's hard to understate how pivotal the fandom itself was to getting new people into the show. You couldn't go anywhere online without seeing pony reaction images, or Brony speak, which is when people would say every pony, bro hoof, and things like that. The phrase 20% cooler, said by Rainbow Dash in the Season 1 episode Suited for Success, is a famous example of Brony speak transcending into a widespread meme. Just 2 months after Season 1 finished airing, Equestria Daily celebrated 20 million pieces of fan art posted. At this point, 4chan had no choice but to lift their pony ban, with the site's founder Chris Poole personally apologizing and giving them their very own board. Ponies, we f***ed up and turned our back to one of the largest subcultures in 4chan's history. This was not out of malice, but ignorance. So we're trying to make this right, and give the ponies the home they've deserved from day one. Of course, not everyone was thrilled by this loud, inescapable community. Their overwhelming presence unsurprisingly bred resentment. Bronies received a page on Encyclopedia Dramatica, which tries to answer the question that many continue to ask to this very day. Why? Most compelling is one post written by an anonymous user on 4chan's Comics and Cartoons board. "I think the cuteness and childness appeals to our original innocence, and innocence knows no shame. Ponies are not the beginning either. Beatards have a history of embracing cute and innocent things. What's interesting is this runs parallel to the Beatard reputation for being the most vile, wretched goblins. I think they're connected. Their innocence is torn from them in childhood, seared out of them in school, and then are cast out into the world to be bachelor frogs. Somewhere deep down they remember what they were. Maybe part of them is still that way. They see ponies, and damn society's gender roles, they like them. Then they fap to them. But then they continue to watch the show because it reminds them of something good and pure they had before the hardness of the world robbed them of it. The important part of this equation is that many of the fans were in fact pleasuring themselves to the ponies. It started early on in the fandom when some pointed out that the characters had quite pronounced rears, epitomized in memes like, quote, "I want to come inside Rainbow Dash." In May of 2012, a plushie of the character Lyra went viral after going on sale at an auction. It was marked as an adult toy with a curious hole placed on it. The doll sold for $704, about $1,000 adjusted for today's inflation. Around this time, My Little Pony became a popular target of Rule 34, the internet's adage that if something exists, there will be explicit images of it. Bronies who enjoyed the show's characters in these special ways were given a new label by the community: cloppers. One extremely dedicated clopper released a blog post at the time revealing that by the summer of 2012, the series had accumulated over 13,000 NSFW images, on track to become the second most perverted series of all time for the genre. I bet you'd like to know what number 1 is, you freak. Throughout the years, the rankings of the main six in this context were mostly consistent. From least to most popular, Applejack, Rarity, Fluttershy, Pinkie Pie, Rainbow Dash, and in first place, Twilight Sparkle. Jumping forward a bit so we don't have to talk about this again, Fluttershy rose in the ranks in 2014, reaching third at 7,000 images. By then, the series as a whole had surpassed 60,000 Rule 34 uploads. This was such a big market that a year later, The Hub, yes the internet one this time, published an article giving insight to Brony demographics. The most compelling is arguably Fuda. MLP Fuda ranks in at 4th place and represents well-known pony Fluttershy, who has been turned into Futashy as a fusion of her name and hentai term Futanari, which refers to a character who mostly appears female but has male genitalia.
Now this might strike some viewers as harsh, but I believe everyone involved in this story should die.
The close association between Bronies and Pony Rule 34 are to put the wider subculture in a different light. Many would end up taking performative stands against them, stating they gave non-offending Bronies a bad name. The following is an excerpt from the site debate.com titled, "There are worse things than cloppers in the Brony fandom. I, as a Brony, am here to tell you there is nothing worse than a clopper in the Brony fandom. Cloppers take an innocent show and twist it around to strip it of its innocence like a rapist easily strips a woman of her virginity. So no, there is nothing worse in the fandom than a clopper. They ruin the fandom, they ruin the community's public image, and they think it's funny/normal. In the end, the anti-clopper won 3-0. While it certainly wasn't all Bronies, Brony speak phrases like wingboner and clopping did not help their case. The latter would be the focus of a notorious cringe video titled, "Dad, I'm a Brony."
I'm a Brony.
The hell is that?
I watch My Little Pony, Dad. That's another thing. I kind of watch relating to ponies.
What?
This video exploded with the phrase, "It's called clopping dad," spammed around the web. While the original has been deleted, re-uploads have since amassed millions of views. 2013 is when the predominance of cringe culture began, spawning an appetite for sites like the Cringe Channel in the form of best of cringe compilations. As meetups became more frequent for MLP, Bronies quickly generated enough material to get their own dedicated cringe archiving channels. Some of these compilations can run for hours, so I'd like to share just a few of my personal favorites. Over the years, the show had several tie-ins with McDonald's giving out exclusive toys in their Happy Meals. This isn't unusual anymore in the age of official licensed collectible adult meals. But the way some Bronies would respond to not getting their favorite pony in these meals was absurd to say the least.
Hang on. Hey, I've got the same of both toy, and it turns out I want Pinkie Pie and Rainbow Dash.
Which one?
Pinkie Pie and Rainbow Dash. It turns out that I got both of the same one.
You don't have two of the different ones.
Oh.
I'm
well,
sorry.
That's alright. Well, at least I can't pretend that one's Rainbow Dash and one's Pinkie Pie.
What are you doing the video for?
An unboxing of the Happy Meal toys for YouTube because there's this huge counterculture of on the internet called Bronies.
In other cases, when herds of Bronies got together, they invaded public establishments like Walmart and Pizza Hut, making sure to let everyone around them know they loved a show intended for little girls.
We're about to go over to Pizza Hut and order us a pizza with a little interesting oh, Fluttershy. Gentlemen, onward.
With all that said, this increasingly negative reputation did little to scare off the show's staff from embracing their fans. Tara Strong, the voice of Twilight Sparkle, accepted her role in the fandom, declaring herself the Queen of the Bronies. When the Jerry Springer Show made an open call for Bronies to appear on the program, she commended them for not going on. A popular YouTube series at the time was the self-explanatory Bronies React. It showed how many different walks of life came to love this simple little cartoon. Strong praised the military Bronies as her favorite for the fact that they fight for our country and teach love and tolerance.
I love my military bronies, they're my favorite.
Lastly, before we get back to discussing the show itself, a number of famous celebrities made themselves known as bronies during this era. The list included Lady Gaga, Seth Green, and Andrew WK. Although, if we're talking about famous bronies, I would be remiss if I didn't mention Christine Weston Chandler, aka Chris Chan, who had surprisingly been a fan of MLP before Generation 4 even began. It's clear that there were a lot of unique people watching the show by the time Season 2 was airing. In the first part of the second season's finale, A Canterlot Wedding, the main six are invited to the wedding of Twilight's brother and captain of Celestia's royal guard, Shining Armor. While initially angry that she was not informed earlier that her sibling was getting wed, she calms down when she learns the identity of his bride-to-be, her old babysitter, Princess Cadence. She also discovers that things have been on high alert following an anonymous threat, and Shining Armor has been wearing himself thin and maintaining a magic force field around Canterlot. As the days go by, Twilight becomes more and more skeptical of Cadence's rude behavior, and is confused why nobody else seems to agree with her. After Cadence is successful in turning all of Twilight's friends against her, the princess secretly reveals her true evil nature to our heroine, trapping her in the caverns beneath Canterlot, so the wedding can go off without interruption. The second part picks up right where the first left off, as Twilight discovers the real Cadence imprisoned alongside her. The duo race to escape the caverns before it's too late, and arrive at the ceremony just in time to stop Shining Armor from marrying the imposter. The fake Cadence is revealed to actually be Queen Chrysalis, ruler of the Changelings, a race of beings that transform in order to feed on the love that others have for the ponies whose lives they steal. Chrysalis explains that she has been siphoning Shining Armor's energy in order to weaken his magic barrier, and her army of changelings swarms into Canterlot. The main six wage war against the invaders, but what ultimately wins the day is the genuine love between Shining Armor and the real Cadence, which blasts the changelings away. Part 2 of Canterlot's Wedding is IMDb's fourth highest rated My Little Pony episode with a score of 9.2. In fact, Season 2 as a whole is the overall best reviewed season of the entire show. It's interesting to compare it to the previous finale. While the stakes of that episode were about the ponies being disappointed by a party they had been excited for, in Season 2 they must engage in an action-packed battle with the entire fate of Equestria on the line. The priorities of MLP's second season in general seem to have shifted drastically. New villains were being introduced who were actually calculating threats rather than just mindless monsters or simple bullies. We were also being introduced to more of our main characters' family members, and Shining Armor's marriage to Cadence, while minor in the grand scheme of things, still represented a noteworthy status quo shift. It's clear that with the success of Season 1, the team had more creative control and pushed the show in directions that they knew more mature audiences would enjoy. This successfully grew the Brony fandom to a level no one thought was possible, when people first started to ironically watch the show in Season 1 to get it banned on 4chan. In short, the show was pretty good. Before continuing discussions of the TV series, we need to take a detour for a project that began to pick up traction in the fandom. In the May of 2012, Michael Brockhoff launched the Kickstarter for BronyCon the documentary. Directed by Laurent Malachi, the film would follow a handful of bronies and their journey to the upcoming convention. Interestingly, John Delancey, the voice of Discord, was an executive producer on the project. He was surprised by the sudden influx of fan mail from bronies, and desired to learn more. The show's creator, as well as the voice actress Tara Strong, were also part of the project as executive producers, with the former offering original artwork as a $3,000 reward. With an asking amount of $60,000, the campaign reached 4 times its goal, netting $322,000. Most likely due to the fact that this was at the peak of crowdfunding mania when Kickstarter was still a novel concept. This allowed them to expand the project and document European brony conventions such as Galacon and Buck. They shot the film over the summer, although the scope grew beyond these conventions. The film became a mix of BronyCon footage and personal stories of individual fans. It captures emotional moments, like a brony's attempt to be accepted by his father.
I was very nervous about my dad finding out. He might be thinking that I'm gay, or a man-child or something.
Interviews with the people behind the show offer insight into the creative side of the series, featuring additional segments animated in the show's style explaining the evolution of the fandom. This change resulted in the film being renamed to Bronies, the extremely unexpected adult fans of My Little Pony. Bronies released digitally in January of 2013. Though initially celebrated by people within the fandom, those outside of the bubble, such as myself, were not as big of a fan. A popular criticism levied by people such as YouTuber Jenny Nicholson was that the tone infantilized Bronies and ignored any aspects that required critical analysis.
The documentary obviously can't talk about 4chan or the sex stuff or anything that would warrant critical examination. So then how do you explain bronies in your big brony documentary? So what they settled on is bronies are a bunch of neurodivergent men who are so stupid that they need a show for 4-year-olds to teach them genuine lessons about friendship. And that's beautiful, isn't it? I'm not going to claim that there aren't tons of bronies on the autism spectrum, but what a weird and reductive way to examine that.
I suppose it makes sense that the filmmakers didn't go gloves off with the criticism of Bronies considering it was funded by Bronies. Still, the movie serves as a time capsule of what public perception was like at the time, and how closely the production interacted and embraced their unexpected fans. Though certainly the most professional effort, John D. Lancey was far from the only individual to attempt to make his own Brony documentary. Many fans took interest in cataloging their community's past, as it was, after all, an unexpected subculture. A handful of these were done for school assignments, which they saw as an opportunity to explain what bronies were to their entire class. The most popular of these was made by an at-the-time new YouTuber named Saberspark, who created a documentary titled Ballad of the Brony. It was made for his college study of deviance course, explaining the early fandom and where they came from. This video received 500,000 views, helping establish his eventual prospering online career. But not all instances of brony public humiliation happened at schools. During a voice actor panel at the inaugural Ever Free Northwest convention in 2012, one particularly socially awkward fan raced to the front of the Q&A line to ask this question first.
However, as most of us are aware, there's a darker side to the fandom which we know pretty well. To Mrs. Oliver and Miss Libman.
Great.
Alright, so I'm pretty sure you're aware of Princess Celestia being portrayed as a tyrant, an internet troll, and God forbid, a molester. And Pinkie Pie and Fluttershy on occasion...
No.
I'm canceling this
Yeah,
question.
so I'm going to let you know from where I stand, the darker side of the fandom is not part of what I will talk about.
After the first few successes, brony conventions such as Everfree started appearing all over North America, but it varied wildly in how competently they were managed. The most infamous example is perhaps the Las Pegasus Unicorn Convention held in Las Vegas, Nevada, which managed to secure show staff including Tara Strong. The event was expecting 2,000 attendees, with 1,200 pre-passes sold. But when featured guests arrived, they found no money available to pay them, nor the location. If that wasn't bad enough, the event's organizer, Sandy, told the hotel to charge attendees to make up for the debt. This led many who showed up to actually lose money. In what was later described as a Ponzi scheme, Sandy walked away with an unaccounted for amount of at least $40,000. It was such a disaster, many feared it would ruin their relationship with the crew forever. Tara Strong tweeted, "Scared to do new cons, no one was paid, cost us money. Missed my son's karate tourney. Get it together and be responsible." Thankfully, this did not sever their trust in the community, and for the most part, subsequent events went without a hitch. However, there were now growing criticisms over the conduct of attendees, particularly raising concern over how they behaved around the show's young voice actresses. As it turns out, also in attendance at many of these events were the voice actresses for the Cutie Mark Crusaders: Michelle Kreber, Claire Corlett, and Maddie Peters. Corlett and Kreber were 12 years old, while Peters was 15. Despite this, they were often allowed to hang out with adults unsupervised. A post from 2012 would outline several of the alleged inappropriate behaviors by bronies at Everfree Northwest. "I've heard some wacky things went down at Everfree Northwest." Assault, molestation jokes around the younger VAs, conventions conspiring against and stealing from each other, open transphobia. Can any of these incidences be confirmed? It's worth noting that at the time, Kreber said that the three were not threatened or harassed in any way, and the fans were nothing but awesome. However, one of the YouTubers who had hung out with Kreber at an event was Mando Pony, who in 2020 was accused of having inappropriate conversations with minors. Footage from one of these events that year shows Mando Pony joking about being infected with Kreber fever after getting a hug from the young girl.
This is Mando Pony, making very gross comments that you shouldn't be making about any 13-year-old.
Yes. You now have the Kreber fever. Oh, I've had the Kreber fever. I've had the Kreber fever. It's just now I'm contaminated.
At the very least, it shows a lack of boundaries that you'd expect between an adult and a 13-year-old.
Who else wants a flugelhorn? I want a flugelhorn!
Back to the show itself, MLP's third season marked two important milestones for the series. One, it was the first to have no creative input from Lauren, who by that point had completely stepped away from her original role. And two, it is the only season to feature just 13 episodes rather than the standard 26. While there doesn't appear to be any official explanation for the length being cut in half, it seems to be a fairly common consensus that this was done in order to meet the minimum cap of 65 episodes that is required for a TV show to enter syndication. Whether or not this was true, it pointed to one troubling conclusion. Season 3 of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic was originally intended to be its last. The potential final season begins with the Crystal Empire Part 1, in which Twilight and her friends are informed that an ancient kingdom in the far north known as the Crystal Empire has returned. You see, the empire was lost 1,000 years ago after its ruler, King Sombra, began abusing his power and was banished for it. The main six travel north to assist Shining Armor and Cadence in protecting the newly returned empire, only to discover that all of the residents are low-spirited and have no memory of their former king. Twilight eventually deduces that in order to fully restore things, they will have to hold a crystal fair, in order to use the cheer it generates to power a relic called the Crystal Heart. There's just one problem. They have no idea where the heart is. As Twilight races to find it, the other ponies put the fair together and Sombra's dark magic begins to seep back into the Crystal Empire. In Part 2, Twilight and Spike find the Crystal Heart hidden in a secret passage beneath Sombra's old throne room. They're able to return it just in time before the evil king's corruptive influence completely destroys the Empire. The villain is defeated and the citizens are fully restored, giving all of the ponies new crystal forms that I'm sure sold a lot of toys. In the end, Celestia compliments Twilight on a job well done, while Cadence and Shining Armor stay at this new location in order to become its rulers. Even though it's not the strongest season opener in the series, this two-parter still demonstrates a desire to expand the lore of Equestria, and creates another minor status quo shift that will have ramifications later on. Spike at Your Service was at the time the lowest rated episode of My Little Pony on IMDb with 6.1 stars. This follows a trend of many of the worst reviewed installments in that it focuses on Spike as the lead character.
Smell like dirty feet. Done!
In this particular instance, the young dragon decides that he owes Applejack a life debt after she saves him from a monster, making the self-sufficient pony very uncomfortable. Based on what I can glean from online Brony discussions, Spike as a character is far from universally despised. In fact, he seems to be fairly well-liked or at least tolerated by the majority of the fanbase. The problem comes from the fact that he's written very inconsistently from episode to episode. Sometimes he's intelligent and responsible, sometimes he's a naive slacker, and sometimes he's the comic relief punching bag. Additionally, while it isn't the focus of the particular episode, it's worth noting that another aspect of Spike's character that fans take issue with is his crush on Rarity. It's rarely something that's brought up beyond a quick joke here or there, but the idea of a dragon having feelings for a pony in any capacity seems to upset a lot of audience members. But humans finding them hot, that's a-okay. I'd also like to mention here, for no reason at all, that Spike at Your Service includes a scene of Applejack being inflated. Dobson would be proud. The following episode, titled Keep Calm and Flutter On, features the return of Discord, as Princess Celestia tasks Fluttershy with reforming the villain so his magic can be used for good. Unsurprisingly, this is a difficult task, as Discord has absolutely no interest in becoming a good guy, and seems to just be using Fluttershy's kind nature to have some fun at her expense. In the end, though, he realizes that he actually does in fact think friendship is magic and vows to change his ways. This is the episode that really cemented Discord as a fan-favorite character. It seems his voice actor was sick of just being known by Star Trek nerds and was more than willing to reappear on MLP as many times as the showrunners would allow. While he had been instantly beloved in his debut episode, this demonstrated that he had more layers than just a simple villain of the week. In a series filled with ultra-friendly do-gooder protagonists, it was nice to have someone around with a bit of a mean streak, who had the capability of being morally ambiguous. Season 3's final episode, Magical Mystery Cure, sees all the main 6 except Twilight Sparkle mysteriously switch cutie marks, and subsequently all taking on each other's jobs around Ponyville without any of them remembering how things used to be. Twilight realizes this as a result of her meddling with an ancient spell that wasn't fully complete, and thus must make things right. After reminding all of her friends who they are supposed to be and restoring their original cutie marks, Twilight is teleported to an ethereal dimension where Celestia explains that her education is complete. Twilight returns to Ponyville as an alicorn, a pony with both a unicorn's horn and the wings of a Pegasus, signaling that she is now a fully fledged princess. I'm sure this sold a lot of toys. The show had dropped many hints that she was being prepared for something greater. However, speculation Twilight would become an alicorn was unpopular and considered a fringe crackpot theory. A poll on the subject from mlpforums.com at the time showed only 31% would approve of Twilight becoming an alicorn. 33% said maybe, and 36% said no. The eventual reveal was so divisive, some left the fandom over it for good. There were countless articles trying to articulate why this was such a terrible decision. Looking back though, the twist was ultimately accepted by the fandom, showing that despite their openness, the writers still had many surprises up their sleeve. The thing was, whether or not the fans would see these new ideas felt a bit up in the air at the time. As previously stated, the predominant theory online was that Season 3's shortened episode count meant that Hasbro was considering ending the show. The tone of Magical Mystery Cure supported this idea, as it was filled with songs and had a grandiose conclusion that made it so it would have worked as a series finale. This was confirmed when M.A. Larson, one of the credited writers on the episode, spoke about it during a panel a couple years later.
When I was writing that script, it was the end of the show. That was the final episode. And then 2 or 3 months after, I turned in my locked script. Surprise! Season 4. But I was done, so I was like, oh, yikes, good luck, Megan.
But before Season 4 came out, there was one more pony project worth discussing, the first feature film for this incarnation of the franchise, Equestria Girls. The first trailer for this movie was released in May of 2013, 3 months after the airing of Magical Mystery Cure, and showcased a story in which Twilight Sparkle travels to an alternate dimension, where all the pony characters viewers had come to know and love were human teenagers attending high school. This caused an uproar in the fanbase, with many bronies decrying Hasbro for what they viewed as selling out Lauren Faust's vision for My Little Pony. This isn't what Lauren wanted! It's not the end of the world, but you can see it from here. This is where you begin to see the divisions of the My Little Pony fandom. The first were the adult men who made up the majority of bronies. Despite insisting it's fine if we enjoy a show for little girls, many were reluctant to admit it was a show for little girls. A common talking point you'd hear was that the show had references to pop culture like The Big Lebowski and The Beatles. This provided a shred of evidence to support their cope the cartoon was made for adults, rather than just being a wink to parents watching the show with their daughters. Equestria Girls was a good wake-up call that at the end of the day, they were still just trying to sell toys to little kids. This side of the fandom was often at odds with the community on Tumblr. Those fans were often much more progressive, taking interest in shipping. Rainbow Dash was the most popular suitor, paired with most of the other main 6. While the adult men claimed to like the show because they were sensitive or open-minded, they were also quick to insist Rainbow Dash wasn't gay. There were a flood of images showing her upset at the accusations, or dismissing the flood of fan art and fan fiction. Every time you call Rainbow Dash lesbian, it rains somewhere. Heterosexual cartoon lusting was alright to these folks, but this LGBTQ shit went too far. Despite these disagreements, when the designs for Equestria girls were revealed, Tumblr also got upset. The premise had led many people's imagination to run wild. It was assumed a lot of effort would be put into making sure their appearance matched their personalities. When the official designs were shown, all with the same body, boring outfits, and original colors to avoid questions of race, they were left extremely disappointed. After all, it's a cartoon made to sell toys to little girls. At its core, they all feared this new canon would replace the main show. It was around this time that Monster High was big, so it's possible that Hasbro wanted to end the show after Season 3 and make this the next big generation about the teenage girl forms of the established characters. While people were losing their minds on forums and message boards, there was one particular detail from the movie that was getting the most attention. There were a couple brief shots in the trailer in which Twilight was shown with a teenage boy, prompting speculation that she may be getting a love interest in the film. Half of the fan base was angry because this seemed like too much of a stereotypical girly direction to take the character, and the other half were angry because their fictional pony crush was in danger of being taken. This second group popularized the meme of calling the love interest Brad, since no official name had been released. When the movie finally premiered on June 16th, though, it was revealed that Brad's real name was Flash Sentry, but he was indeed a love interest for Twilight Sparkle. The film's writer, Megan McCarthy, came out a couple months later in order to quell some of the outrage and clarified that while Equestria Girls was canon to the main series, nothing that happened in it would affect the show in any way. While this was effective at appeasing some upset bronies, it would come to bite her a little later on. Perhaps this goes without saying, but the hatred that adults had for Equestria Girls did not stop the actual audience, small children, from loving it. Hasbro had gotten what they wanted, a new lucrative spin-off franchise that I'm sure sold a lot of toys. The success kickstarted a whole new slew of films, with the series receiving 10 total movies and a handful of shorts that you can't make me watch. For all of its faults, Equestria Girls gave a ton of new fodder to parody in memes and remixes. A popular channel at the time was Friendship is Witchcraft, an abridged series created by Griffin Lewis and Jenny Nicholson. It was quite transformative, introducing new story elements as well as original musical numbers. Their parody of Equestria Girls' Horsewoman proved to be the most successful, filled with many of the criticisms that had become in-jokes within the fandom.
And I'm walking on sunshine. Whoa.
That guy kinda looks like your brother.
This was the golden age of MLP parody content, so I think it's worth taking a moment to discuss some of the animations getting popular around this time. Max Gilardi, or Hot Diggity Demon, had already made a name for himself on Newgrounds with Jerry and wacky game jokes for kids. But in 2011, he got swept up with the rest of the internet and created the first of his Pony.mov shorts. Apple.mov now sits at over 30 million views, with each subsequent installment raking in similar numbers.
Applejack's in a coma, Rarity's being held captive by Mexicans, Fluttershy's in the nut house, and Rainbow Dash is dead. Any more questions, smartass?
It's easy to interpret the self-deprecatory tone as ironic, but Gilardi clearly liked MLP on some level. He knew things only someone who watched the show would know. He would end up hosting panels at several Brony conventions, where he sometimes premiered new cartoons live. One of these panels was co-hosted by Egoraptor, making it a true time capsule. The series was an immediate hit in the fandom, to the point a mob of fans would chant a quote from his character R-5000 that summer.
Yo, these people are a bunch of freaks.
A different animator that blew up around this time was Animated James. He became known for his crossover videos, with Sonic vs. Rainbow Dash amassing 78 million views. But his relationship with the fanbase was much less pleasant. Both of his experiences at Brony conventions were negative. At the first con, he was yelled at for drawing on someone's face, despite being asked to. During the second, James got punched in the face while trying to film a music video. He would end up leaving the internet for unrelated reasons, with his last contribution to the fandom being released in November of 2015. Another interesting piece of MLP lore during this period was that people started to notice a particular influx of show-accurate animations after 2014. This is because a file full of original show assets leaked online, giving fans access to rigs, puppets, and other artwork. This was actually a major concern for a while, as since they were using stolen production materials, some worried Hasbro would strike down the copyright hammer harder. Thankfully, this doomsday scenario for the fandom never ended up materializing, allowing them to enter a new age of My Little Pony Fanimations unscathed. Unfortunately, not every MLP fan project escaped from Hasbro's litigation. Since the show's inception, ideas for MLP-themed video games have been conjured up by fans. One of the earliest of these imagined a 2D Street Fighter-style video game. On PonyChan, this caught some users' imagination enough to form a team dead set on making the project a reality. The concept became Fighting is Magic, debuting their first trailer that summer. It made headlines across the gaming community, with the reveal amassing over 1 million views. However, in the summer of 2012, someone broke their NDA and leaked early builds of the game online. The developers, Main 6, stopped providing public updates in response. In January 2013, Fighting is Magic was in talks to be showcased at EVO. Sadly, this monetary offer would lead the project to receive a cease and desist from Hasbro. This was a major blow to development. It seemed like there was no choice but to cancel the game, only for the decision to result in an unlikely collaboration. In response to the DMCA, Lauren would end up tweeting the following to the developers. Main 6 wants some original characters to make a new game with? Not MLP, OCs. Something totally new. In 2015, the developers launched a crowdfunding campaign for its successor, Them's Fightin' Herds. The game utilized the same mechanics, but now featured new original designs by Lauren Faust. The project managed to surpass its goal, raising $586,000. After 5 years of development, it was finally released in 2020 to critical acclaim. I haven't played the game myself, but it's been reviewed pretty favorably and the art is very well done. Sadly, however, it came far too late, and the hype for an MLP-style fighting game had passed. In 2023, the game officially ceased development, citing a lack of sales, and will no longer receive any new updates.
Congrats, by the way, on the promotion. You totally deserve it.
After a brief hiatus, Season 4 kicked off with the two-parter Princess Twilight Sparkle, in which our titular heroine gets used to her new role as a princess. The episode begins with a lot of recap for the lore of previous seasons, indicating that this was essentially a repilot after last season's fall series finale. Just as she's getting used to her new responsibilities, Twilight suddenly finds herself thrown into the deep end one morning as Celestia and Luna mysteriously vanish, and sinister black weeds begin growing all over Equestria. After drinking a potion from a mystical pony named Zecora in order to find some answers, Twilight sees a vision of Luna, who has apparently turned back into Nightmare Moon, ending part 1. The cliffhanger is resolved when Twilight realizes she's witnessing a vision of Celestia's original battle with Nightmare Moon from 1,000 years ago, giving further credence to the idea that this story's goal was to reacquaint audiences with the previous continuity. After another drink of the potion, she sees an even older flashback to Celestia and Luna taking the elements of harmony from the Tree of Harmony. The main 6 travel to the Everfree Forest and find the tree, returning the elements to their original place and destroying the black weeds. The story ends with Celestia and Luna returning, and the Tree of Harmony sprouting a mysterious box with 6 locks, setting up the overarching mystery for the season. The 9th episode of Season 4, Pinkie Apple Pie, centers around Pinkie Pie going on a trip with Applejack's family to find out if they're related. However, it's notable for reasons unrelated to the plot. At 16 minutes in, a pony with no eyes and a suit appears in the bushes. If you blink, you'll miss it, as he quickly disappears, but eagle-eyed fans noticed and recognized it as a stand-in for Slender Man, yet another reference to date this story to the 2010s. At the time, urban legends claimed that this creature would appear in cartoons. Another famous example was the supposed image of Slender Man in Gravity Falls, later confirmed to be fake. This instance was undeniably real, and as a result, the scene went viral across social media. While the artist behind this gag has never been identified, writer M.A. Larson later claimed that they were ultimately fired.
Somebody who has since been fired put that in. Yes, it's true. Somebody unauthorizedly put that in. That's an adverb, right?
It's worth noting that the veracity of this claim has been disputed. Some believe he was simply joking and there was no proof of any actual repercussions to the person who snuck it in there. Episode 11 of Season 4, Three's a Crowd, isn't worth discussing for the story either, but rather for another incidental background pony. During a scene in which Princess Cadence enters, viewers noticed a familiar face by her side, Flash Sentry. This seemed to go against what Megan McCarthy had said earlier about nothing from the Equestria Girls movie affecting the main show, and thus caused another online fervor. This time around, it wasn't addressed by the MLP crew, but it's important to mention that people were freaking out over a character without any lines of dialogue, and who never even looked at Twilight in his few seconds of screen time. Episode 13, Simple Ways, is another episode that's worth mentioning for one specific moment rather than its overall plot. It follows Rarity as she tries to impress a culture writer she has a crush on named Trenderhoof, but he is much more enamored with Applejack. This culminates in the two having a fashion show face-off, although Applejack isn't actually interested in Tenderhoof. She turns him down politely before being interrupted by Rarity.
You're a fine pony, but, well,
I think what Applejack is trying to say.
Many would assert that before being cut off, Applejack was about to say, "I'm a lesbian." As we mentioned before, there was massive backlash from certain parts of the fandom at the prospect of Rainbow Dash liking women. Well, over time, her most popular pairings were with women. It was primarily split between Rarity and Applejack, the latter of which places like 4chan despised. One common rebuttal came from Faust herself, who disagreed with the notion Rainbow Dash had to be a lesbian simply because she was a tomboy. Rainbow Dash has rainbow-striped hair because of her name and because she is very interested in sports, specifically flying. She is a tomboy, but nowhere in the show is her sexual orientation ever referenced. As we all know, there are plenty of straight tomboys in the world. This fueled endless debates that would continue for the show's entire decade-long run. In part 1 of the season finale, Twilight's Kingdom, Equestria's newest princess is disappointed by the lack of responsibilities her role has given her. This isn't helped when Celestia and Luna receive a vision that an old villain named T-Rex is returning to steal all the magic in the land, and they send Discord to stop him rather than Twilight. But she is undeterred, choosing instead to investigate the mysterious box from the Tree of Harmony to see if it could be of any help. The ponies eventually realize that the keys to the 6 locks are actually items given to each of them throughout the season, although Twilight still hasn't found her key. Meanwhile, Discord is confronted by T-Rex, but is manipulated back to the side of evil by the villain. The duo cause destruction across Equestria, stealing magic wherever they go. Twilight is summoned back to Canterlot, where she is informed that she will have to take the magic of all the other princesses so that T-Rex won't be able to find it, ending part 1. Now saddled with the combined power of Celestia, Luna, and Cadence, Twilight returns to Ponyville to reconvene with her friends. But T-Rex is one step ahead of her as he easily captures the main 6 and betrays Discord by stealing his magic as well. Twilight and T-Rex engage in a knockdown, drag-out fight which results in the complete destruction of Twilight's house. Finally, the bad guy offers her a deal. He will release her friends, including Discord, if she gives up her magic. She agrees, giving the villain ultimate power. Feeling guilty for his actions, Discord gifts Twilight with an amulet given to him by T-Rex. This ends up being the final key, and the box opens to reveal a hidden magic inside. The ponies are charged into new rainbow power forms, which I'm sure sold a lot of toys. They're able to use their new combined force to easily defeat T-Rex and restore magic to Equestria. A new castle also magically appears in the spot where Twilight's home used to be, and Celestia dubs her the Princess of Friendship. Twilight's Kingdom is near the top of the most well-liked season finales in MLP history, with both parts charting in IMDb's top 10 for the show. While Part 1 takes the number 10 spot with 9 stars, Part 2 is the second highest rated episode of the entire show with a score of 9.3. It certainly does feel like the highest stakes storyline thus far. T-Rex posed a seemingly insurmountable threat, and Discord's temptation back to the dark side only made the character more compelling to fans. And the very end promised new exciting possibilities for the future, with Twilight and her friends now living in a massive castle, and solving friendship problems throughout Equestria. With the continued unprecedented success of Friendship is Magic, it was only natural that Hasbro would continue to find new ways to capitalize on it. On October 20th, 2014, it was announced that a theatrical film had entered development. Bronies were skeptical after all the drama surrounding Equestria girls, but they were assured that this movie would stick much closer to the canon of the show. The release date was set for 2017, so there was still quite a bit of time before pony fans could assemble in the theater. During that wait, many hoped Bronies wouldn't get put in any new negative headlines, but of course that was merely wishful thinking. Given the sheer amount of cringe content, a lot of infamous Bronies have come up over the years. However, there is perhaps no story as infamous as the Brony fluid jar incident, which has transcended into internet legend. For those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, I apologize in advance. It all began on April 1st, 2014, when an anonymous user made a thread on 4chan. The man attached a photograph of a glass jar containing a figurine of Rainbow Dash, as well as a small amount of reproductive liquids. He continued posting updates near daily, slowly filling up the jar until the pony was completely submerged. This routine carried on for 7 months, until disaster struck on November 27th. Hello, my dearest MLP. I come before you today to reveal a horrible accident to the Pony Jar project. The place where I was hiding my jar were actually on top of a kind of radiator that was connected to our furnace, and of course, since it's getting colder, we light it up. So basically, the Rainbow Dash figure has been boiled in cum. It's brown now. And for comparison, I have also got another glass of cum that's about a week old. The thread was screen capped and went viral, subsequently receiving coverage from BuzzFeed and Gawker. Some believed it was too absurd to be real, but as the years passed by, the user continued to share updates on the project. For example, in 2016, he revealed he now utilized a separate jar for shooting it in before pouring it onto the toy. This photo showed he actually had 2 separate Rainbow Dash figurines in different jars. A year later, the Anon shared what he presumed to be his last update. He was going to transfer Rainbow Dash to a more compact airtight container, uploading footage of the process to YouTube. He then thanked them for witnessing the drowning of Rainbow Dash. After this, there was one final update in the form of an interview with YouTuber Justin Wang, where he answered many pressing questions.
I wouldn't call myself a furry.
Yeah.
But I have had an attraction, especially to Rainbow Dash.
Another particularly infamous Brony from this time period was Jin15, who first appeared in 2015 messaging not safe for work artists. He demanded they stop drawing naked pictures of his fiancée Twilight Sparkle. Jin set up dates with his plush, even proposing to her complete with a ring. But what started off as a somewhat wholesome, albeit cringe photo set quickly became nauseating. 2 years later, Jin uploaded what he called the messy experiments. I'll let you Google it if you want the details on this freak, since this video took too much work to get demonetized this far in. A popular online pony series during this time was Dan vs. Friendship is Magic. These edits were created by a user known online as Flufflepuff. They are much more well known for creating this design of a fluffy pony in January 2012. Intended as a cute one-off, the design grew into its own subculture, spawning waves of fan art and fanfiction. The concept was fairly innocent at first, but over time it evolved into something sinister. A common reoccurring fantasy was having a pet pony to raise. My Little Dashie, an early landmark of the fandom, imagined her transported to the human world with no memories of her past life. Written by Rob Cakeran53, it was adapted into a short film that garnered over 38 million views. Fluffies took this dream a step further. They began to speak with a babyish lisp, emphasizing their helplessness. This activated 2 distinct groups, those who wished to nurture the Fluffies and those who wanted to watch them suffer. The latter became a dark subculture known as Fluffy Pony Abuse. These abusers, as called by the Fluffy decks, depict them being tortured and dismembered. They will draw pictures of fluffy ponies being attacked by animals, burnt, or other grim scenarios. It feels like a way to relieve some repressed sadistic pleasure. There are pages upon pages of headcanon, some offering dystopic backstories of factory-made pets. It just goes to show how deep these niche subsects of fandom freaks can go.
Muffin?
As mentioned earlier, Friendship is Magic was aired on The Hub, a joint venture between Hasbro and Discovery Communication. This changed in 2014, starting with the resignation of Margaret Loach as Hub Network president and CEO by the end of the year. Discovery acquired 10% of Hasbro's stake, now controlling the majority of the network. Hasbro also granted Discovery the exclusive rights to continue airing Friendship is Magic. On October 13, 2014, the Hub officially closed, being relaunched as Discovery Family. This is where My Little Pony Season 5 and onward would premiere, with Hasbro's properties now being split across different networks and streaming services. Season 5 kicks off right where the previous season ended, as the ponies discover the premier's namesake, the Cutie Map, had suddenly appeared in their castle's throne room. Even though they don't fully understand it, they see symbols representing each of their cutie marks pointing to a spot deep in the far-off mountains of Equestria, so they decide that that is where they must go next. When they arrive, they discover a small village of suspiciously cheerful ponies who all have identical cutie marks. Their leader, Starlight Glimmer, explains that this village is the only place in Equestria with true friendship, since no one is unique and therefore nobody can feel superior to anyone else.
No offense, but it sounds like some fucking commie gobbledygook.
She shows the main six a vault hidden deep within the mountain cave where she keeps all of the villagers' original cutie marks. She then steals the marks of all the protagonists, robbing them of their special skills, and imprisons them until they accept Starlight's rule. In Part 2, Fluttershy is able to escape being locked up by convincing Starlight that she has come around to her way of thinking. While doing some investigating, she discovers the shocking truth that Starlight still has her original cutie mark, and has been lying to everyone about it. When this secret is exposed to the village, they stage an open revolt against the leader, storming the vault and freeing their special abilities. Even though Starlight manages to escape justice by fleeing into the mountains, the villagers thank the main six for restoring their identity. This is one of the stronger season premieres the show has had thus far, with the unique setting and a plot that gives more of the individual ponies aside from Twilight something to do. Slice of Life is the 100th episode of Friendship is Magic, and is the 5th highest rated entry of the series. It puts the main six on the sidelines, choosing instead to focus on some of the background characters who had become beloved staples of the Brony fandom over the years. It primarily centers around Derpy, Vinyl Scratch, and Dr. Hooves, a reference to the globally beloved smash hit British television show Doctor Who. My writer put that line in there, not me. All of these names were created by fans. In some ways, Slice of Life is a genuinely enjoyable episode that feels like a sincere love letter to the Brony community. It's hard to imagine what the show would look like without the fans creating their own headcanons for the world. At the same time though, it was a jump the shark moment where the intrigue of how much the show would change for the fandom was lost. There was a sort of vibe shift where viewers became more aware of the fact that the show would pander to fans. Thankfully, since it was largely isolated to one episode, this was mostly an unfounded fear. While Season 5 had the highest concentration of top-rated episodes, it is still overall a mixed bag in terms of quality. Take What About Discord, for example, the number 2 worst-rated episode of the entire series, with a 5.3 out of 10 stars. In the 22nd episode of the 5th season, after Twilight spends an entire weekend holed up in her library, she emerges to discover that all her friends had suddenly become incredibly close with Discord. It's not hard to see why this one was so disliked. Discord was a fan-favorite character because of how he grew and evolved over time, so to see him suddenly become much friendlier with the ponies off-screen felt cheap. To quote one Bronies review, "This is how to take one of the show's funniest and most entertaining characters and not just make them completely unfunny, but take away what made them such a great character in the first place. One of the show's worst ever character distortions." The Season 5 finale, the Cutie Remark, sees the return of Starlight Glimmer as she seeks revenge against Twilight and her friends. Her plan is to travel back in time to prevent the sonic rain boom that resulted in the main six getting their cutie marks from ever happening. Twilight and Spike try to stop her but are unsuccessful, resulting in history being changed so that she and her friends never met and Equestria is at war with the Crystal Empire, which is now ruled by King Sombra. After another failed attempt to stop Starlight in the past, Twilight and Spike are now set forward to yet another alternate future in which the changelings successfully conquered Equestria, leaving the audience on a cliffhanger for part 2. The next episode continues this very repetitive plot structure of Twilight and Spike going back to the past and then returning to a new alternate timeline where a different villain won. After doing this several more times, they're finally able to bring Starlight into the future with them so she can see the damage she's caused. This makes Starlight have a breakdown, revealing her motivation. As it turns out, when she was a child, her only friend in the world was a fellow unicorn named Sunburst. But when he displayed impressive magical skill and got his cutie mark before her, he was sent off to school to hone his talents, leaving her all by herself. Starlight is still able to see the error of her ways, though, and restores the timeline to what it once was. The main six meet to discuss what her punishment should be, eventually deciding that Starlight should live with them in the castle so they can re-educate her. This finale was not the most warmly received by the fanbase. The repetitive nature of the story didn't help, but the main thing Brony seemed to object to was how weak Starlight Glimmer's backstory was compared to how far her plans went, and how easily she was forgiven. And any viewers who didn't like the character were in for an unpleasant surprise when the next season rolled around.
Morning, Starlight. Whoops!
In the Season 6 premiere, The Crystalling, Twilight and friends, including Starlight Glimmer, are invited to the Crystal Empire for the birth of Cadence and Shining Armor's baby. Meanwhile, Twilight instructs Starlight to reconnect with her old friend Sunburst when they realize he's living in the Crystal Empire, and has apparently become a powerful wizard. When they arrive, the main six discover that the child was born as an alicorn, something previously unheard of. This also means that she has uncontrollable magic abilities, which is demonstrated when she destroys the crystal heart merely by crying. Part 1 ends with dangerous Arctic storms entering the Crystal Empire, since it was the power of the heart keeping them out. In Part 2, Starlight Glimmer decides their only hope of survival is Sunburst, but he is forced to confess that he's not really a wizard. While he's very knowledgeable about magic, he's not skilled at actually performing it. Even so, he is able to figure out the correct combination of spells to restore the Crystal Heart, ending the crisis in the nick of time. In addition, he's also able to control the power of the baby, who is now named Flurryheart. As you can tell, the lore in the series starts to get a little out of hand at this point of Friendship is Magic's run. The amount of places, people, villains, heroes, and concepts that are being reintroduced in single episodes is hard to keep up with even as an adult. I can't imagine the original target audience of 6-year-olds being able to keep up with the show's later season mythos. In episode 6, No Second Prances, Twilight tasks Starlight with making her first friend completely on her own. While she doesn't seem to bond with anyone in Ponyville, she forms an instant connection when she meets Trixie. Twilight is immediately skeptical of her, making Starlight feel untrusted, but Trixie later reveals that she did indeed only become friends with Starlight out of spite for Twilight. In the end, though, the two ex-bad guys realize their connection was genuine all along, and they become best friends. The Season 6 finale, To Where and Back Again, begins with Starlight being invited to her old village to attend their annual Sunset Festival. She brings along Trixie for moral support, but quickly becomes uncomfortable and decides to leave. When they arrive back in Ponyville, they discover that almost everyone, including the princesses and the main six, have been replaced by changelings. This leaves the fate of Equestria to the team of former villains, Starlight, Glimmer, Trixie Discord, and a reformed changeling named Thorax. In the second part of this story, Discord teleports the group to the area just outside of Queen Chrysalis's castle. But Thorax informs them that none of their magic will work once they enter. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the team finds it's difficult to work together under these conditions, forcing Starlight to take on a leadership role. After a dangerous journey and overcoming the many tricks the changelings try to use on them, they eventually make it to the center of the hive where all of their friends are being kept. Starlight and her team are confronted by Queen Chrysalis, who is quickly overwhelmed when she attempts to drain Thorax's love. This causes Starlight to realize that the changelings need to share love rather than steal it, turning them all into new forms that I'm sure sold a lot of— oh wait, they didn't actually make any toys for them, never mind. The story ends with the changelings becoming good and Thorax stepping up to be their new leader. When Chrysalis is offered the same chance for reformation, she refuses, vowing revenge before escaping. You may have noticed that Season 6 had a strong focus on Starlight Glimmer as the primary character for most of the overarching plot-centered episodes. Even though her introduction the previous year was a bit shaky, many more Bronies came away from this season liking her since they felt that Starlight's motivations and internal conflict had been significantly fleshed out. Shortly before Season 7 began airing, a catastrophic event would hit the fandom that would take years to recover from. On April Fool's Day 2017, 4chan decided to merge boards together to see how communities would adapt. For example, they combined CO and CK to create cooking and comics. But the combo that stirred the most noise was mlpol, which combined the Bronies with 4chan's politically incorrect board. You may expect the alt-right users to have overwhelmed the pony fans, but it was actually the opposite. It must be understood that there are two types of boards on 4chan, red and blue. Blue boards are safe for work where no adult content can be posted. This means the MLP board, which is blue, outlaws Rule 34. Pol, on the other hand, was a red board, so when the two combined, this meant MLP erotica was allowed. The catalog was flooded with MLP Rule 34, with Bronies clearly taking the opportunity to let out their long-repressed thoughts. After this initial wave, the two groups formed a surprising alliance, resulting in a new wave of World War II-themed pony art. As it turns out, the two groups had a lot in common, both being containment boards from the rest of the site. It's not as if Bronies were a stranger to white nationalism either. In 2014, the fan-created pony, Aryan, went viral featuring white fur, a blonde mane, blue eyes, and an old-school German cutie mark. They got along so well, a substantial group began campaigning for the boards to stay merged together. Their demands were to no avail, so they began fighting back. This escalated to the point that mlpol waged war on another board, QA. Their efforts got little accomplished, but it spawned a part of the community that never really left. As late as 2020, articles have been written about the fandom's battle with white nationalist pockets of the group. That same year, Derpy Buru, the most popular Brony fan art site, officially banned racist content. So much for being inclusive. Despite this outrageous example of cancel culture, the show galloped along to Season 7.
Are you choosing to be an apple over being a pear?
The first episode of Season 7, Celestial Advice, is the only season premiere of My Little Pony to not be broken into two parts. When Starlight and her team are awarded Medals of Honor for saving Equestria, discord goads Twilight into thinking she needs to send her pupil away to have a more hands-on friendship education. While Twilight tortures herself trying to figure out the perfect idea, she gets some advice from Celestia that ultimately leads to her graduating Starlight. This is by far the lowest stakes the first episode of a season has had so far, but fans still appreciated it for the growth shown by both Twilight and Starlight in the end. Season 7, Episode 13, The Perfect Pair, is the highest rated episode in the entirety of Friendship is Magic, with a score of 9.5. When Applebloom meets a pear farmer named Grand Pear at the market, it leads her, Applejack, and their brother, Big Macintosh, on a journey of discovery about their family history. They learn that the Apple family was once engaged in a generations-long feud with the Pear family, and that their mother, Buttercup, was a pear. She and their father, Bright Mac, carried on a secret romance until it was discovered by their families on the night of their elopement. Grand Pear, who is revealed to be Buttercup's father and therefore Applejack's grandfather, made his daughter decide between her family and her new husband. She chose to stay with the Apples, resulting in her never seeing her father again. Applejack and her siblings confront Grand Pear about this, and he apologizes for his past actions, finally putting an end to the Apple and Pear feud. It's easy to see why this episode is so beloved. The identity of the Applejack's parents had also been a bit of a fandom mystery, and this answered just enough questions while leaving room for speculation. It seems as though there are two consistent themes when it comes to MLP's highest rated episodes, in that they usually focus on either lore expansion or fleshing out a character's backstory. The perfect pair does both, and clearly succeeded at what it was going for. Season 7's finale, Shadowplay, begins with Sunburst discovering the lost journal of Starswirl the Bearded, a wizard who mysteriously disappeared eons ago alongside his team, the Pillars of Old Equestria, while battling an evil entity called the Pony of Shadows. The journal is brought to Twilight and her friends who, after some research, are led to an ancient site called Ponehenge. Once there, they see a vision of Starswirl and his team banishing the Pony of Shadows to Limbo, trapping themselves in the process.
Ban world, population U.
Twilight realizes there may be a way to bring them back, tasking all the other main 6 members with finding relics associated with each pillar of Old Equestria. They're successful in freeing the ancient heroes from Limbo, but Starswirl reveals they've made a terrible mistake, for releasing them also releases the Pony of Shadows, ending Part 1 on a cliffhanger. Part 2 begins with the Pony of Shadows destroying Ponehenge, making the original spell that sent him into Limbo impossible to perform again. Our heroes manage to escape, and they begin formulating a new plan to defeat the monster once and for all. After some time, the Pillars tell the story of how they once had a friend named Stygian who they caught trying to steal their magical artifacts, causing a chain reaction of events that ended with him becoming the Pony of Shadows. While Starswirl is adamant that their former ally is beyond redemption, Starlight Glimmer has doubts. She eventually is able to convince Twilight to try talking to the villain before banishing him again, and she learns that the incident that caused his friends to reject him was just a misunderstanding that resulted in him being corrupted by a power called the Darkness. Stygian is freed, everyone forgives one another, and Starswirl and the Pillars decide to travel across Equestria to see what they've missed in the centuries they've been gone. Considering how long the show had been airing at this point, it's impressive to think that Friendship is Magic was still able to maintain such a strong fan base, even 7 seasons in, with more and more world building being added. And before the 8th could begin, there was one other My Little Pony project yet to be released, that had been promised long ago, the feature-length film.
I need to set up for my sound check.
The first trailer for My Little Pony the movie was released in June of 2017. This immediately put any of the Brony community's fears to rest that the film would rely on gimmicks like live action or 3D that other contemporary animated children's films had used at the time. In fact, the animation quality looked very strong, as it was clear the budget had been greatly improved from an episode of the TV show. But still, there was another cause for concern, as the trailer ended with an eclectic list of celebrities who would be adding their voices to Equestria. Emily Blunt, Liev Schreiber, Taye Diggs, and Sia were just a few of the names who would be playing characters. While this worried some onlookers, the main 6 ponies would still feature as lead protagonists and would be voiced by their TV actresses. Not only that, but Jason Thiessen was set to direct, and longtime MLP writer Megan McCarthy and Michael Vogel were both credited as scriptwriters. The movie released in theaters on October 7th, 2017, and follows Twilight Sparkle and her friends venturing out of Equestria when it's invaded by a villain named the Storm King and his henchwoman Tempest Shadow. Their journey brings the ponies to new and frightening lands, including an undersea kingdom in which they change into mermaid forms that I'm sure sold a lot of toys. The ponies are of course able to triumph over evil in the end, saving Equestria, redeeming Tempest, and killing the Storm King in a shockingly brutal death scene. My Little Pony the movie raked in over $61 million on a budget of just $6 million, making it a bona fide success. Critics were rather dismissive of the whole thing, but fans were largely positive. They praised the grand scale, slick animation, and catchy musical numbers. That being said, one recurring complaint was that the main 6 ponies, with the exception of Twilight and Pinkie Pie, mostly felt like they were being sidelined in favor of the new celebrity-voiced characters. Still though, it was another win for the franchise, and an excuse for childless men to leave their homes and enter crowded theaters alongside young children and their parents.
Then perhaps you should return to your kind.
Season 8 picks up right where the movie left off, in school days. After their journey, Twilight decides that the best way to spread their message beyond Equestria is to open a school of friendship. She is given provisional approval pending a full review, and immediately sets to work trying to prove her concept. The main six are hired as teachers, and races from all across Equestria and beyond send representatives to become students. But when Chancellor Naysay of the Equestria Education Association arrives for his review, he's appalled to see the racial diversity on display, as he believes the school should be for only ponies, and he shuts it down. 4chan really liked this pony. Part 2 begins with Twilight sulking about her failure until a pep talk from Starlight Glimmer convinces her that it wasn't the school that was wrong, but rather Naysay and his rules. When they go to the other kingdoms to try and get their students back, though, they learn that they all ran away together since they had already bonded and didn't want to be apart. The students are located and agree to try the school again, standing in defiance of Naysay's bigotry, with them winning in the end. In my opinion, School Days is easily the weakest season premiere in MLP's entire run. The idea of turning all of the main characters into teachers at a school felt like a creative team running out of ideas, and the immense focus placed on the new group of students, later dubbed the Young Six, made it seem as though the writers had become bored of the original protagonists. The Brony fanbase was largely mixed on this whole thing. This was the first time ever that a season opener had elicited anything short of a completely positive response. Clearly something was off, and things would unfortunately not get better from here. In Season 8, Episode 9, Non-Compete Clause, Applejack and Rainbow Dash butt heads during a class field trip as they both want to win the Teacher of the Month award. With such a simple premise, it might surprise you to learn that this is the all-time lowest rated MLP episode on IMDb, with a rating of 4.4 stars. Fans lambasted it for its reductive character writing, claiming that the script had ignored years of development that had been given to Rainbow Dash and Applejack. The overall tone felt like a show for preschoolers, with a simplistic moral and shallow writing, far from the standards that grown adult men had come to expect from My Little Pony. If the premiere had caused doubts in the minds of Bronies as to the future of the show, Non-Compete Clause only served to sour them further. In the Season 8 finale, School Raise, magic across Equestria suddenly begins to fail. The main six suspect that their old enemy, T-Rex, may be behind it, so they travel to his prison in a search for answers. Meanwhile, Starlight Glimmer is left in charge of the school. Cozy Glow, a student introduced earlier in the season who also works as Twilight's assistant, quickly announces that Starlight had to leave at the last minute, putting her in charge. When the main six arrive at the prison, though, they are horrified to learn that it was actually Cozy Glow who was responsible for the disappearance of magic. Not only that, but they've accidentally trapped themselves with no magic left for them to escape. Back in the school, the Young Six discover Starlight trapped in the basement, ending Part 1. I bet a lot of MLP fans would like her trapped in their basement. In the second part, Cozy Glow reveals her motivation for all of this. She has come to the realization that friendship is not magic, but power. And if she can't control the School of Friendship, she can gain enough power to rule Equestria. But her plans are dashed when the Young Six are able to free Starlight and restore all the stolen magic. Cozy Glow is exposed for her crimes and then imprisoned. Just so we're clear, this season ends with a child being banished to the My Little Pony equivalent to hell. Overall, Season 8 sits as the lowest rated batch of episodes on average for MLP. The new focus on the school proved to be alienating for most Bronies, with the Young Six in particular falling flat. The high stakes of the finale at least seemed to be appreciated, and Cozy Glow was well liked as a new villain, but as a whole it seemed as though Friendship is Magic was giving less thought to their adult fans than usual, much to the disappointment of Bronies. In the midst of Season 8, a different type of news would befall the fandom. On July 31st, 2018, Tom Weissam, a Canadian animator who worked on MLP, was sentenced to more than 2 years in prison after pleading guilty to possession of CP. Police found over 60,000 explicit images on the 55-year-old's device. The arrest of someone working in children's entertainment caught the attention of believers in the Pizzagate theory. Weissam's arrest was taken as proof of a broader Hollywood network, despite there being a world of difference between Hollywood and the My Little Pony TV show. He was hired during season 5 and is credited as a character builder on 26 episodes. He also worked on Littlest Pet Shop between 2012 and 2015. The connection resulted in conspiracy theorists who didn't know anything about Brony lore combing through episodes for clues, but nothing substantial turned up. Despite a quick boost in mainstream attention due to the headline, by the end of the lackluster Season 8, Friendship is Magic was running out of steam. Looking on Google Trends, by 2018 the show had been on a popularity decline for several years, and had now lost roughly 2/3 of its mainstream popularity compared to its height only half a decade prior. With this, it perhaps shouldn't have come as much of a surprise when, on February 16, 2019, it was officially announced that the upcoming Season 9 would be the end of My Little Pony Generation 4. Even though they had been let down by the previous year, Bronies still found it difficult to say goodbye. So they gathered around in front of their TVs to bid farewell to their favorite show when the final episodes began airing in April of that same year.
And Chrysalis, you say something nice about ponies. Never!
The fittingly titled final season opener, The Beginning of the End, kicks off with Celestia and Luna announcing their retirement, naming Twilight Sparkle as the next ruler of Equestria. This news on its own is enough to stress Twilight out, but she is flung into a full-on panic when she learns that the switch will be taking place in just a few days. Meanwhile, a group of the pony's old enemies consisting of Queen Chrysalis, King Sombra, T-Rex, and Cozy Glow are assembled by Grogar, an evil emperor from before Equestria even existed. He proposes an alliance to defeat the main six once and for all, but Sombra rejects the idea and goes out on his own to reconquer the Crystal Empire. While he's successful at first, Twilight and her friends are able to easily defeat him using the elements of harmony, the first time they have been utilized in many seasons. But when they go to return the relics to the Tree of Harmony, they realize they have been tricked. Sombra only pretended to be defeated so he could follow them back to the tree, and he proceeds to destroy both it and the elements. Part 2 begins with the ponies now trapped and powerless to stop Sombra as he goes off to conquer Ponyville. When they finally do manage to escape, they find their friends mind-controlled and marching to evade Canterlot. To make matters worse, without the Tree of Harmony, the ever-free forest begins growing out of control. The main six try in vain to hold it back, but Celestia, Luna, and Star Swirl arrive just in time to stop it, freeing up the ponies to go confront Sombra and Canterlot. When they arrive, they ask for help from Discord, who reluctantly agrees even though he admits he wanted Twilight to prove she was capable of saving the day on her own. During his fight with Sombra, though, Discord is injured, proving even his godlike magic isn't enough to stop him. Even so, he manages to give the ponies a pep talk that bestows in them the confidence to use their friendship to blast Sombra away, saving the day once again. Even though Twilight has proven herself a capable leader, the story ends with Celestia and Luna agreeing to delay their retirement to give Twilight more time to prepare. The middle episodes in the season don't really have anything interesting going on, so I'll be skipping right to the grand finale now. The ending of the end begins with Chrysalis, T-Rex, and Cozy Glow stealing energy from Grogar's bell, an ancient artifact containing all of his stolen power. They then betray Grogar, stealing his magic and revealing him to have been Discord the entire time. Now, without his magic, Discord rushes to Canterlot, where the ponies are preparing for Twilight's coronation, and confesses what he's done. His plan was to pose as Grogar and assemble the villainous alliance so that Twilight and her friends could defeat them, leaving no doubt of their ability to rule Equestria, but the whole thing got away from him. Before the plan can be devised to stop them, the villains attack. T-Rex easily defeats Star Swirl and the Pillars. Chrysalis takes down Starlight Glimmer, and Cozy Glow heads straight for Canterlot and uses Grogar's bell to steal Celestia and Luna's magic. The whole alliance then arrives at the castle to gloat, revealing that they have also been spreading distrust between all the races of Equestria, effectively destroying friendship. With all hope seemingly lost, the ponies create a diversion so that Twilight can escape and come up with a new strategy, ending part 1 on a cliffhanger. The reveal that Grogar had secretly been Discord the whole time is now considered one of the show's biggest controversies. Grogar was first teased in the Season 7 episode A Flurry of Emotions as the fictional antagonist of a children's book. He was based on the Generation 1 villain by the same name, originating from the 1986 television series. The revelation he was real flipped the show's lore on its head. Not only was making him an evil emperor of a forgotten time a clever reference, but it also made him feel like a real threat. To discover that Grogar was simply a fabrication created by Discord was disappointing, ruining any stakes and the potential of this direction. In Part 2, the Alliance have seemingly completely taken over Canterlot, but Discord is able to trick them into accidentally freeing their prisoners, allowing the main six to escape and search for Twilight. They find her in the Crystal Empire, where she has thus far had no luck in finding a way to defeat the villains. After a pep talk, the group returns to Canterlot, but are still no match for the Alliance's combined power. Thankfully, hope is returned when all of their friends from across Equestria arrive to help, with the young six and the rest of the School of Friendship students revealing that they healed the divide between the races. Using the combined magic of all of their friendship, Twilight takes back the power that was stolen by Chrysalis, T-Rex, and Cozy Glow, and they are sealed in a statue together for the rest of eternity. Twilight is finally named the ruler of Equestria, and she and her friends celebrate a hard-earned victory. My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic ended with one final epilogue titled The Last Problem. Many years in the future, Twilight is dealing with a student named Luster Dawn who doesn't see the value in friendship. We see a flashback to her coronation day. While Twilight is worried about how things will change once she moves to Canterlot full-time, she's devastated when her friends don't seem to care that she's leaving. They quickly reveal that they do care, of course, and Twilight convinces them to all travel to Canterlot with her despite all of the preparations that still have to be done for the ceremony. This causes the coronation to go horribly wrong. Back in the future, Luster Dawn assumes this means that their friendship fell apart because of that, but Twilight explains that couldn't be further from the truth. That's when the rest of the main six ponies enter, telling Luster Dawn that just because they don't see each other as much as they once did, it doesn't mean that their bond is any less strong. Twilight decides to send her student to Ponyville in order to learn new lessons about friendship, ending the series the same way it began. The Last Problem is the third highest rated episode of Friendship is Magic with a 9.3 stars. A lot of that probably comes simply from the fact that it is the series finale, but it also is a genuinely heartfelt goodbye to these characters. I could see a person who had watched the show over the course of a decade tearing up at this finale. Bronies also latched onto it for explaining just enough about the future of the ponies while still leaving room for speculation. For example, the brief glimpse we get of Fluttershy towards the end seems to imply some sort of romantic relationship between her and Discord. Perhaps more interesting and slightly more explicitly stated is the connection between Applejack and Rainbow Dash. While no pony ever refers to them as a couple, they do say that they are living together, and Rainbow Dash has her hoof resting on Applejack's head in the final frame, promoting speculation that they were married. This was far from the in-show confirmation that many fans expected. When questioned about this on Twitter, the writers left it ambiguous and up to the viewer to decide. As it turns out, this wasn't just a controversial pairing in the fandom. Leaked Hasbro emails revealed that there was heavy disagreement during the script writing process. Some writers pushed for more explicit confirmation, but in the end there was enough objection that the idea was left in intentionally vague. Well, after 9 long seasons, MLP G4 had finally come to an end. Regardless of the conclusion itself, this was devastating for those who had grown attached to the characters. It seemed like we may never see the main six again, forced to be content with the same finite material forever. Then, in April of 2019, there was a glimmer of hope. That month, a video parodying steamed hams from The Simpsons went viral. The meme had been around for quite some time, already having tens of thousands of different iterations. But what made this one stand out was its use of AI technology to replicate the voices of Presidents Trump and Obama.
Well, Seymour, I made it, despite your directions.
Our Superintendent Chalmers, welcome. I hope you're prepared for an unforgettable luncheon.
While rudimentary, it was impressive enough to garner 500,000 views. The description explained it was synthesized using AI models trained on their speech patterns. This resulted in a thread being made on 4chan's MLP board. I propose we use this technology to create accurate text-to-speech voices for the main 6. You don't have to think long to imagine the possibilities. Although knowing you guys, it will be for waifus. This post would end up becoming the Pony Preservation Project, a community effort to collect as many usable voice samples as possible so they could keep the characters alive. The sheer amount of labor to get it off the ground was insane. They worked tirelessly, going through each episode and labeling every individual sentence in Audacity. They had linguistics specialists going through and notating every emotional marker to deepen their voice profiles. By April 14th, they already had their first rudimentary models. That means they had a proof of concept in 5 days.
I don't know what will happen. You look great. Please allow me to introduce myself.
By July, they were able to get their model to speak full original sentences. But that was nothing compared to what came next. On November 17, 2019, a user later known as 15 made his first post. This immediately raised the bar, with his model better than anything they had heard before. The user alluded to it being a part of a bigger project, though what this meant at the time was unclear. The results were impressive enough to go viral on Twitter, such as Twilight reading the Navy SEAL copy pasta.
I am trained in guerrilla warfare and I'm the top sniper in the entire U.S. Armed Forces.
Many pointed out 15 was doing things that theoretically at the time would have taken 5 years of innovation to achieve. He also declined to make his code open source. This led to conspiracies that 15 may be involved in some kind of government agency. It's clear he was involved with AI development on some level, to the point that they feared publicizing his efforts. Whatever the case may be, that changed once he shared the first iteration of his 15 AI website on February 26, 2020. His site was directly tied to MIT, thanking them for providing the project's initial funding back in 2017. Voice generation was made available a month later, and 15 AI spread to the broader internet. The site expanded beyond MLP to include characters from other franchises. The list only grew as time went on, helping normalize the technology beyond a novelty.
I love the gamer from Mars.
It's crazy to think that when people look back at the history of AI technology, they're going to have to thank Bronies for a lot of it. MLP fans were fixated on making this AI technology work, as many of them actually felt that there was no life worth living without new content with their pony companions being made. In one case, this obsession ended in tragedy. On April 15, 2021, shooting erupted at a FedEx ground facility in Indianapolis. The attack left 7 injured and 9 killed, including the perpetrator, a 19-year-old former employee named Brandon Scott Hull. While his motive remains unclear to this day, his digital footprint did provide insights, namely that he was a lifelong brony. In between reading white supremacist forums, Hull enjoyed My Little Pony to the point he referenced it in his final post on Facebook. I hope that I can be with Applejack in the afterlife. My life has no meaning without her. If there's no afterlife and she isn't real, then my life never mattered anyway. Of course, there were undoubtedly greater factors to the shooting than My Little Pony. Hull had a troubled upbringing and was deeply mentally unwell. At the same time, his final post exhibits a level of delusion that it wouldn't be inaccurate to say that he committed the act in the name of Equestria. Photos of his room released as part of a Freedom of Information Act request show that his entire dwelling was decorated in MLP memorabilia. It gets even darker though. The gun he used, as well as a helmet he wore, were covered in stickers of his favorite ponies. An Applejack plush was also spotted on his bed, which he appeared to sleep with at night. Some in the community have pointed to Hull as an example of a larger problem in the fandom, the near-religious dedication they have to the show and its stated values. One user compared it to a death cult that didn't happen in a vacuum. And it should be noted that this was far from the only violent crime attributed to the show. In February 2015, 17-year-old Dean Sutcliffe fatally shot 2 people in his ex-girlfriend's home. Upon his arrest, they discovered a picture of his ex as well as My Little Pony collector cards in his pocket. Dean's Facebook was later uncovered, showing he posted under the name Blake Belladonna. His banner was an image of Princess Luna. A year later, Sutcliffe pled guilty to 2 counts of first-degree homicide and was sentenced to life in prison. In 2015, a Brony was apprehended in Illinois. This time, it was a 23-year-old woman named Lindsay Cantha Savanaranth. Lindsay ran the Tumblr blog Cock Swastika, which showed her obsession with mass shootings and Nazism. She was also reportedly tied to a Facebook page filled with bizarre images mixing the World War II German leader and My Little Pony. Lindsay and a Canadian man named James Gamble plotted an attack on a Canadian shopping mall. It was thankfully thwarted before it could be carried out. Gamble took his own life once authorities closed in. Lindsay pled guilty to conspiracy to commit murder and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Our final true crime story takes place in September 2016, in the sunny state of California. Josh Acosta, 21 years of age, was a military brony. He worked as an army mechanic at Fort Irwin. He frequently made drawings of the main 6 in military gear. His Facebook page showed he was a member of the My Little Anti-Bullying Project. Frank Felix, a 25-year-old, was a furry, not-safe-for-work artist. He was known online by the name Enti. The 2 men were best friends and active members of their local furry communities. It was through these groups that they would meet Jennifer Yost, as well as her 17-year-old daughter, Caitlin. Felix bonded with Caitlin over My Little Pony, attempting to groom her and eventually declaring his love. These included hopes they could start a family and make Caitlin's sisters their children. Unsurprisingly, her parents didn't approve, as they felt she wasn't ready to date anyone at the time. This led Felix to begin plotting to have her parents murdered in a staged robbery gone wrong. He went to his old friend Acosta to carry out the ambush. And for some reason, the man agreed. The attack took place on September 23, 2016. Caitlin, as well as her 6 and 9-year-old sisters, weren't home. Acosta broke into the family's dwelling with a shotgun, murdering Jennifer and Christopher Yost, as well as Arthur William Bucci, a family friend. Their bodies were discovered by her 6-year-old sister, who was also the one to phone 911. The duo were arrested less than 2 days after the murder. Both Felix and Acosta were convicted on 3 counts of murder, both getting consecutive life sentences. Across all these different crimes, it's hard to pinpoint an overall effect My Little Pony had on the perpetrators. For the most part, its relevance seems incidental, although there is a huge overlap between homicidal bronies and the Nazi pockets of the fandom. At the very least, these sorts of questions have allowed for a more critical examination of the subculture as a whole. As one longtime brony put it on the MLP subreddit, in the early days of the fandom, before the first major drop-off in fandom participation, it was considered judgmental and taboo to talk about how this cultural phenomenon could lead to people who shouldn't be around kids having access to little girls. It also doesn't help that Hasbro and the writers started to pander to the bronies within the actual show either, because it gave them power. A common example of the over-sexualization problem was the case of the Make-A-Wish ponies. For context, over the years, many sick kids would get their original characters in the show through the Foundation. However, this led to friction when those characters were subjected to Rule 34 art. The specific ponies in question were Angel Wings and Stellar Eclipse. The latter was made by a teenager named Sylvain Nicholas, whose mother made a post asking people not to degrade his character. Sylvain is 17 years old, suffers from spinal muscular atrophy, and is a minor. He does not want his character defamed or degraded in any way, shape, or form. However, she later issued a retraction clarifying she hadn't spoken to Sylvain about it. My son was never consulted, and those messages do not reflect his views on the content of art regarding his character. As an artist himself, Sylvain has told me that he respects all forms of art regardless of content. A later investigation from the MLP subreddit also revealed that most of the NSFW artwork was likely commissioned by Sylvain himself, or a person he was dating. At the very least, they were able to confirm that the supposed spiteful Rule 34 scenario was heavily misconstrued. At the same time, though, they were still dealing with a minor. It's crazy to think that what originally was a show ironically watched by adults as a troll ended up to be such a genuine obsession for thousands that it's been linked to a variety of crimes, murders, and abuse cases. Regardless of the bad press, Hasbro still had a cash cow on their hands, and with the 4th generation officially over, they had to get to work coming up with the next iteration. And Bronies were nothing less than skeptical about the future.
You two ready for the funhouse?
As it turns out, shortly after Friendship is Magic concluded, Hasbro got straight to work on developing My Little Pony's 5th incarnation. It was quickly decided that the series would be animated in 3D, without the involvement of Lauren & Company. Because the toy giant didn't retain full rights to the previous iteration since it was made in collaboration with Discovery, they supposedly had to make a new cast of characters, seemingly closing the previous chapter for good. This is about when they started developing a tie-in show for Netflix, of which they first teased in early 2021. Gen 5 kicked off with a movie called My Little Pony: A New Generation that September. Despite reviewing well, it made just $4 million. But its success is hard to gauge due to its primary release being through Netflix during the pandemic. While many bronies took issue with the change in art style and characters, there was one fan in particular who had a uniquely strong reaction to it: Chris Chan. The internet legend had fallen into a deep rabbit hole of psychosis since the beginning of Friendship is Magic that we don't have time to get into here. But suffice it to say that they saw the beginning of Generation 5 as a grave sign for the future of our reality.
MLP G5 does not exist yet in this timeline, period. It should never exist until well after My Little Pony Friendship is Magic Season 14, Episode 26. Divine forces are at work to make this right, and so, you all have the chance to make this easy on yourselves by removing everything MLP G5 and resuming MLP G4 immediately. I have spoken. Please, remedy this post-haste and immediately.
Despite this objection, MLPG5 continued on. Following A New Generation was the premiere of their new show, Make Your Mark, in 2022. This lasted 27 episodes to middling reviews. There was little fanfare or much discussion at all. This lack of reception led its 2nd season to be cancelled mid-production. It was also in 2022 that the Gen 5 web series Tell Your Tale began on YouTube. This web series was created by Little Critter Workshop, who caught people's eye with their more familiar 2D style. Unfortunately, reflecting a lack of interest from the Brony community, both shows would end before they really had a chance to find their footing. Make Your Mark ended in 2023, while Tell Your Tale lasted until 2024. The latter reached a total of 93 episodes, albeit only 5 minutes long each. Even with such a loyal audience, Hasbro seemed to have lost the ability to monetize the cash cow that was Friendship is Magic. A no-brainer would be to put the show's music on streaming. Eventually, Hasbro did release an album of the official instrumentals. The only problem was that these weren't the actual instrumentals at all. They ran the final mixes through an AI vocal remover and called it a day. This was especially baffling as Daniel Ingram revealed he'd long since provided them with the original files. With rumors of legal issues preventing their use of Gen 4 characters, one has to wonder if they'll ever return at all. It would serve them well to regain control of Twilight Sparkle & Company, since as of writing, Hasbro announced they had started developing a live-action MLP movie. I think that with a quality script, a director with the proper vision, and the return of the Gen 4 ponies, they have a chance at a billion-dollar reboot with the return of bronies ready to spend their hard-earned money. In conclusion, even after watching through the show and learning about the various highs and lows of the fanbase, it's still difficult to ascribe the label of good or bad to the Brony community. On one hand, they provided a space where people who may have felt alienated from society could flourish and be themselves, free of judgment. Their love for My Little Pony extended beyond just what was shown on screen, as they took the time to actually learn the names of the show's directors, writers, and artists. TV cartooning jobs had been seen as relatively thankless up until that point, but thanks to the Brony influence, online animation fans still go out of their way to praise the crews of their favorite shows even to this day. But on the other hand though, the more heinous actions of the adult pony fanbase that we have discussed today are self-evident. They took a show that was meant to be enjoyed by children and twisted it into something perverse, making it difficult for MLP's intended audience to go online without accidentally stumbling upon something they shouldn't see. This too is an influence that's still felt to this day, as it's impossible for a new animated children's show to become popular without Rule 34 art of it flooding the web. And while I can't back this up with any statistics, it seems very clear that the MLP fanbase has a larger portion of it that are into these perverse sections than any other fandom. But even the non-sexual bronies have been accused of gatekeeping little girls from engaging with My Little Pony. I think no one can deny that bronies won't be beating the cringe allegations anytime soon. After watching through the show, while my team and I did find a lot of enjoyable elements, it's still difficult to wrap my head around exactly how it took over the pop culture discussion so much in the 2010s. We may never see a phenomenon like My Little Pony Friendship is Magic again, but the impact it left on the internet, for good and bad, is undeniable. One thing's for certain though, which is my favorite pony is Pinkie Pie.